Starting us off at number 10 is Connie Converse. Born Elizabeth Converse and raised in the Baptist Church, in the early 1950s, Elizabeth moved to New York, started calling herself Connie, and began writing songs and performing them for her friends, accompanying herself on the guitar. Didn't take long before Connie began assimilating into her new lifestyle, smoking and drinking for the first time in her life. Now, to be clear, she had no recorded issues, but her parents, still deeply religious, saw this as an act of defiance and essentially rejected her new life entirely and refused to support Connie's music career. Sadly, her parents were not alone in this rejection. Besides one brief TV appearance on the morning show, Connie's singer-songwriter approach to music was not widely popular, nor did she ever really receive much positive recognition. It seems her lyrical, melancholy ballads got lost in the brass, and by 1961, convinced she was a failure with no real talent, Connie quit music altogether. Then in 1974, just after her 50th birthday, Connie wrote letters to her friends and family, essentially stating that she wished to make a new life for herself, and instead of going to the lake for a family gathering where she had been expected, Connie drove away and was never seen or heard from again. There are some theories that she could have taken her own life, but no body was ever found. Although now, some 49 years later, it is likely she could be gone at this point. However, one can only hope she was alive to see when her music became a cult classic in 2009 after being released by Gene Deitch's record label. Next up at number 9 is Forrest Shab, a Vancouver rapper who came into the spotlight back in 2009 after releasing his hit club track Passenger. Forrest began touring Canada as the opener for Akon after signing a deal with CP Records. Now, Forrest performed under the stage name DY, which stood for Die Young, and aside from being an extremely ominous name for someone who disappeared at the young age of 26, was, as far as anyone else could see, doing really well for himself. So I guess that's what kind of makes him especially mysterious. Unlike some of the others on this list, his life and career were actually on a really good trajectory. He was even preparing to drop his second single at the time of his disappearance. But after announcing his upcoming full-length album in 2010, Forrest apparently shot the music video for his second single, and allegedly at that time his contract with CP Records ended. Then in August of 2010, Forrest flew from Toronto to Mexico. A few weeks later, he wished his friend a happy birthday over social media, but sadly that was the last anyone heard from him. By November 18th, he was reported missing in Mexico, and Canadian police began investigating his whereabouts. In December, his family released grave worry about his disappearance, and although some have speculated his disappearance is related to organized crime affiliations or potentially even that he took his own life due to the loss of his contract, it all remains a complete speculation. 12 years have passed and he still remains a missing person with no viable leads about where he could be. Next up at number 8, Oscar Zeta Acosta, a writer, attorney, and activist for the Chicano movement of the United States in the 40s and 50s. Acosta was well known as being a big-time consumer of pills, booze, and hallucinogens in extreme quantities. Not only that, he was a close friend with writer Hunter S. Thompson, who wrote about and immortalized Acosta as the drug-hazed Dr. Gonzo in his novel Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. But sadly, although the book brought Thompson great fame, it also brought a great deal of tension to their relationship that never fully mended while Acosta was in the limelight. Acosta was a well-known public figure with a reputation for disruption, so it perplexed everyone when in May of 1974 he visited his family home in Mexico and simply vanished out of thin air. Thompson spent years searching for his friend with no success, and along with Acosta's son, feared that perhaps his friend had been killed by a drug hit or assassination. However, as no information has ever surfaced, his whereabouts remain a giant mystery to this day. Next up at number 7 is Dan Cooper. Okay, so this man was less of a celebrity before his disappearance, but he became one due to it happening. Back in 1971, a man who went by the alias Dan Cooper hijacked a commercial plane, and no one has ever been able to find him since. According to those involved, involved, shortly after takeoff he handed a note to a flight attendant claiming to have a bomb in his briefcase. He demanded 4 parachutes and $200,000 in $20 bills, which is about the equivalent of like $1.2 million nowadays. Otherwise, he was going to kill everyone on the plane. After the flight landed in Seattle, Cooper released the 36 passengers once authorities provided him with the money and parachutes. But he kept both pilots, one flight engineer, and flight attendants as hostages on the plane. From there, he forced them to fly to Mexico City, but somewhere over Nevada, Cooper jumped off the plane with the stolen cash. The FBI launched a massive search that is still considered one of the longest and most exhaustive investigations in FBI history. But he has yet to be found, and although he isn't on the top 10 wanted list anymore, he is still considered a missing and wanted person. Coming in at number 6, Rico Harris. In 2000, Rico Harris was a player for the Harlem Globetrotters, but despite his clear talent and incredible potential, Rico suffered from alcoholism and slowly but surely began to lose all his athletic opportunities. After losing his position as a professional player, Rico spent the next few years battling his addiction until finally a 2007 overdose led him to a rehabilitation center. After completing the program, Rico wound up working as a security guard in LA, met a woman, and was beginning to really find his stride. The couple were long distance at first, but by 2014, 2 years after they met, things were going really well, so Harris decided to make the move to Washington from California and set up a job interview in his new city. Before the big move, he went to say goodbye to his family in Alabama to get some closure, specifically from his mother, according to his girlfriend at the time. But after leaving his mother's house in Alabama, records show that he drove north, stopping in Lottie, about 40 miles south of Sacramento, to get gas before calling his girlfriend and leaving a message saying that he was going up the mountains to rest since he had not slept much since leaving Seattle. Then, mysteriously, at 11:15 p.m., he turned off his phone, and not a single soul has heard from him or seen him since that day. His car was found abandoned outside Sacramento, and an investigation into his disappearance uncovered a backpack and a phone on the roadside. At the same time, there had been a few reports of a tall man walking along Route 16, and human footprints were found in the sand. But never any sign of Harris himself. Coming in at number 5 is Joe Pitchler. During the late 90s and early 2000s, Joe was a teen actor who received some success appearing in small and supporting roles in several movies and TV shows over the years, like Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, Varsity Blues, and was Brennan Newton in the Beethoven franchise. After his small bit of LA success, his family insisted he move back to Washington so that he could graduate high school there. Joe agreed and graduated high school in Washington in 2005, and according to friends and family, he planned to return to LA in 2006 after his braces were removed to continue pursuing his acting career. But strangely, on January 5th, 2006, after speaking with a friend at about 4 a.m., he was never seen or heard from again. On January 9th, his car was found abandoned and his apartment was left untouched, unlocked, and with all the lights on. And apart from one note that vaguely spoke to a depressed state, there was nothing pointing towards Joe taking his own life. In fact, the friend he'd spoken with on January 5th mentioned he seemed in really good spirits. Tragically, the case has never been solved, and no remains have ever been found, and so 17 years later, Joe remains a missing person, and his whereabouts remain just as big a mystery today as they were then. Coming in at number 4 is Patrick McDermott. Although Patrick worked as a fairly successful cinematographer on a handful of short films in the 2000s, his main claim to fame came from his personal life. Famously, Patrick was the on-again, off-again partner of pop star Olivia Newton-John for 9 years between 1996 to 2005. And at the time of his disappearance in 2005, Patrick was on board a Mexico-bound fishing boat, which was apparently somewhat of a frequent activity for him. But this time, he never returned. He boarded all alone and despite some of his personal belongings, including his car keys, passport, and wallet, which were all found on the boat, Patrick was never seen again. What's especially strange is that according to the Coast Guard, there was no sign of accident, criminal activity, or an attempt to take his own life while on board. The most accepted theory of his whereabouts, after a PI was hired to look into the case for Dateline, is that Patrick faked his own death to avoid substantial debts and allow his son to cash in on his life insurance policy. There are even some conspiracies that he remains hiding out in Mexico to this day with a new girlfriend, but officially there is no concrete evidence that this is true. In fact, one of the photos that was used in an Australian tabloid claiming to be Patrick turned out to be a random guy from Manitoba, Canada, with his wife, leaving us no closer to the truth behind this strange disappearance. Next up at number 3 is Hale Boggs. In 1972, Hale Boggs was one of the most famous politicians in America. A Democrat from New Orleans, Boggs became well known by the public for not only being the House Majority Leader during the Nixon years, but also, or even more so, for his frequent, colorful outbursts while on the job. He famously verbally attacked FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, as well as the FBI as a whole in Congress, became a member who President Nixon refused to take counsel from, and became notorious after outwardly doubting the lone gunman theory of the JFK shooting. Now, Hale was unfortunately someone who suffered from addiction, and it became kind of the belief that most of what he was saying had more to do with his issue with drugs and alcohol than anything else. So imagine the nation's shock when on October 16th of 1972, Boggs, who had been in Alaska helping a fellow congressman's re-election bid, disappeared and was never seen or heard from again. All that was known was that the pair got into an aircraft heading towards the small town of Juneau, Alaska. But despite there being a law that the aircraft needed to be equipped with an emergency locator transmitter, this aircraft was mysteriously not equipped with one. Naturally, the US government instigated a massive search, launching 90 planes to search the area, but no trace of the missing aircraft or its occupants were ever recovered. There are some conspiracies surrounding his death, particularly due to his issues with the FBI and work investigating the JFK case, and some believe he was assassinated. But the truth is that no one really knows what happened to him or where he could have gone. Coming in our number 2 spot is Sean Flynn. Growing up, both Sean's dad and mom were successful actors, and so most of his life Sean assumed he would follow in their footsteps. So after attending Duke University in 1960, Sean embarked on his career and tried to recreate their success. However, after making 10 movies, 8 of which completely bombed, Sean decided that acting was not what he wanted out of life, and in the mid-1960s retired from being in front of the camera and decided to get behind one instead. Sean found his calling as a photojournalist and ended up flying out to Vietnam during the war, working as a freelancer first for a French magazine, Paris Match, followed by Time Life, and finally working for United Press International. During his time as a photojournalist, Sean made quite the name for himself, capturing some harrowing moments of the country's time at war. But unfortunately, it would also lead to his disappearance. In April of 1970, Sean, along with some other journalists, made his way over to Phnom Penh to attend a government-sponsored conference. However, unlike the others, Sean and one other member decided to ride their motorcycles instead of taking the limousine provided. All that is known is that Sean stopped at a location where the Viet Cong was known to be using, and he was never seen again. While there are many theories that he was taken out by the Khmer Rouge, his remains have never been found, and despite extensive searches to find him, no one has been able to uncover what really happened to Sean while visiting the dangerous checkpoint. And last up in our number 1 spot, Zelim Bakayev. Starting in 2013, Zelim began quickly rising to fame after releasing several singles. While climbing the ladder, the Russian pop star applied to be a part of the 10th season production of the Russian version of the popular reality show Star Academy. Salim was accepted and slated to begin in 2017, but tragically he never made it. On August 6, 2017, Salim was traveling to a nearby town to attend his sister's wedding before making his way back to Moscow to begin shooting. But allegedly, on August 8th, he was arrested by Chechen authorities exactly the same day his phone became inexplicably deactivated. By August 18th, no one had heard from him, and his mother, extremely worried about his whereabouts, filed a complaint with her local police about her son's disappearance. Now, the scary part about all of this is that there's a lot of speculation that he was kidnapped and arrested for being gay. Something that is plausible considering the anti-LGBTQ campaign that was going on at the time of his disappearance. And no matter how hard his mom tried, the government refused to open a criminal investigation into his disappearance, but was simply told he would reappear soon. Then in September of 2017, an eerie YouTube video was posted by someone claiming to be Salim, saying that he lives in Germany now, but his family doesn't believe it's him. While no one knows exactly what happened to the poor young man, there are a lot of theories that he was either killed or that he remains trapped somewhere by the government.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Orlando Brown. That's So Raven is an absolutely iconic Disney Channel show that was a huge part of my childhood. One standout character on the show was one of Raven's best friends, Eddie Thomas. Eddie was a goofy jock type character who always provided some good comedic relief, even though all of the characters in that show had their own hilarious moments. Eddie was played by Orlando Brown, and after That's So Raven stopped filming, he had a few more Disney roles, such as voicing the character of Sticky on The Proud Family, but then for a long time he totally disappeared from our screens and had a lot of people asking where he went. Well, he resurfaced after a while, and not in the way we would have thought. While he did end up having a small role in the movie Straight Outta Compton, that was greatly overshadowed by some more personal things he had going on. Orlando was arrested for a domestic dispute with his then girlfriend, as well as being in possession of illicit substances. Since then, he has mainly stayed out of the public eye and hasn't seen many acting roles, which could be in part due to his tumultuous history. All in all, I hope Orlando is doing well, and I hope he stays out of trouble. Moving on to number 9, we have Ashley Brilalt. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. Lizzie McGuire is a Disney classic that a lot of us remember from growing up, and we will never be able to forget the iconic mean girl role of Kate Sanders. Kate had all the best looks and lived a life that I used to envy, aside from her being pretty rude a lot of the time. Kate was played by a woman named Ashley Brilalt, and watching Lizzie McGuire as a preteen is the last time I can remember seeing her, so where the heck did she go? Well, as it turns out, after the show finished, Ashley decided to walk away from her acting days and leave her life of fame. She ended up attending California State University, where she received her BA, and then she moved to Colorado, where she attended the University of Denver. She is now a lawyer, and she is married and has been focusing on her family and being a mom. Career-wise, she is focusing on criminal justice reform, and she also is a strong supporter of numerous charities. While the character of Kate did have some redeeming qualities and moments, it seems as though Ashley is definitely not at all the mean girl that she used to play. In our number 8 spot today, we have Tiffany Thornton. Sunny with a Chance was a show that was airing when I was just getting out of my Disney watching days, but I am sure there are many of you out there who remember this show very well. While short-lived, it was one of the Disney shows where Demi Lovato got her start, of course aside from the iconic Camp Rock movies. While Demi has continuously been in the spotlight since these days, that is not true for all of her former castmates, particularly for Tiffany Thornton, who played the role of the diva Tawny Hart. Tiffany ended up leading the Sunny with a Chance spin-off, but after both shows ended, we truly didn't hear much from her after, which left us all wondering, where had she gone? As it turns out, there isn't much of a crazy story here. Tiffany simply found herself with an opportunity to focus on other things aside from acting, and she took it. She chose to leave her Disney days behind in favor of a life where she could focus on her family and her children. Not many people realize how difficult it can be to be a full-time actor who has a family, so I can totally understand why Tiffany took these steps, and I can appreciate her making the choices she felt were best for her. In our number 7 spot spot today we have Kylie Williams. I don't even know what to say about the Cheetah Girls other than the fact that those soundtracks played repeatedly in my home as a child. Between being absolutely jealous of the lives these girls were living to being empowered by the messages of these movies, the Cheetah Girls is an iconic series of movies that will forever live in my heart. But we are not here to talk about my love for the Cheetah Girls. Right now we are talking about Kylie Williams, who played the character of Aqua in the movies. After the breakup of the Cheetah Girls, we saw Kylie pursue music for a short while, but then we pretty much stopped hearing from her altogether, which left us all wondering where she went. While I don't have a lot of information on why she stepped out of the spotlight, she did. During this time she got married and started a family, and she now has a daughter named Rowan who was born in 2018. For a while she had an internet series with former co-star Sabrina Bryant, but that YouTube channel hasn't seen an upload in the last 3 years. Creatively, I'm not sure what she is up to now, but you can still find her on Instagram, where she regularly posts photos of herself and her beautiful family. In our number 6 spot today we have Raviv Ullman. Phil of the Future was a Disney show that aired from 2004 to 2006 and was about a family who was from the future but who got stuck in the 21st century after their time machine broke down. I remember watching this show growing up, but a lot of it certainly does feel like some sort of a fever dream. The show's titular character Phil was played by an actor who used to go by the name Richey Ullman, but we didn't see a lot of him after the show ended, which of course left people wondering. Well, Ricky now goes by the name Raviv, which appears to have been his real name all along, and he used to just prefer his nickname. Since the ending of Phil of the Future, Raviv might have disappeared from our screens, but he has remained as creative as ever, starring in a few different off-Broadway productions, as well as playing in 2 different bands called Goodbye Ian and His Orchestra. It's good to know that Raviv is still out there creating art, and if anyone ends up listening to his music, make sure you let me know how it is. In our number 5 spot today we have Kay Panabaker. Another member of the Phil of the Future team we haven't seen since the end of the show is actor Kay Panabaker, who played the character of Debbie Berwick. Debbie was known as the extremely chipper and good-natured character, and she was unfortunately written out of the show before the first season ended. After the show, Kay had a few other smaller roles, but she ultimately decided to leave acting altogether after this. You may be wondering what she has been up to and where she has been in the last decade, and thankfully, I have the answer for you. Kay ended up attending university at UCLA, where she studied zoology. After her graduation, she actually somehow ended up back in the land of Disney when she took a full-time job working at Disney's Animal Kingdom. I'm sure that is an extremely cool job, and I think it's pretty awesome that she started out on Disney and after all those years found herself back at Disney in a completely different capacity. In our number 4 spot today we have Alana Austin. Motocrossed was released in 2001 and was a favorite Disney Channel original movie about a young woman who had to hide her gender so that she could compete in a male-dominated motocross competition. It was a super cool movie that I believe had a good and empowering message in the end, from what I can remember, and the movie starred Alana Austin, who we didn't see much of after this iconic role. After this movie, Alana apparently did some small acting roles here and there, but nothing really ever big, and nothing after 2006. After leaving the limelight, she decided to switch her focus from acting to something different, and this is when she went to the University of Southern California in order to study pre-medicine. Alana can still be found on Instagram, where she shares photos of her life and her family, and hey, maybe one day we'll see her return to our screens, but as long as she is happy, that is all we need to hear. In our number 3 spot today we have Lelaine. Another integral part of the cast of Lizzie McGuire was one of Lizzie's best friends, Miranda, who was played by Lelaine. Since we have heard many rumors of a Lizzie reboot, this has left a lot of fans wondering where Lelaine has been since her days on the show. Lelaine has released some music and done a bit of acting since those days, but she has mostly stepped out of the spotlight, especially in the last decade. I'm not exactly sure if there was a reason for this or not, but it seems as though she may be getting back into the acting game, as she recently filmed a movie last year that is in the post-production stages. Her break from the spotlight may have been due to a bit of a rough patch she went through in 2007, where she was arrested due to possession of illicit substances, which was then exacerbated after she missed missed a court hearing. In a turn of good news, however, Lelaine completed her mandatory rehabilitation and, as far as I know, has remained in a better place ever since, which is truly the most important thing. If that Lizzie reboot does end up happening, it would be great to see her reprise her role, because I would absolutely love to see Lizzie, Miranda, and Gordo all back together just for one day. In our number 2 spot today, we have Dennis Day. This one story is a bit different than the others on this list, and it is significantly darker. Dennis Day was an actor and an original cast member of the Mickey Mouse Club as a child. After his child star days ended, he became a theater director. In 2009, Dennis married his longtime partner, Henry Ernest Caswell. In July of 2018, Henry, who was suffering from dementia, was admitted into the hospital after a fall, and this is when Dennis went missing. He was last seen on July 17, 2018, after telling a third housemate, who was also a handyman, that he was going to visit friends. Dennis had left his cat and dog at home, and the dog was found shortly after wandering around the neighborhood. The day after Dennis's disappearance, his car was found around 200 miles away in the possession of some random people who claimed that they had permission to take it, despite the fact that Dennis left the previous day on foot. To try and sum up this long, multi-layered story, one of Dennis's neighbors had a letter from Dennis where he describes being attacked by the handyman. Dennis was missing for quite some time, and despite many searches and a lot of publicity about this case, it wasn't until almost a year later that his body was found. He ended up being found on his own property, and while his cause of death was not released, the handyman, who was a 36-year-old man named Daniel James Berta, was charged with several crimes in connection to Dennis's death, including manslaughter, criminally negligent homicide, and identity theft. It appears as though there was some altercation between the two after Dennis told Daniel that he didn't want him living in his home anymore, but it isn't completely clear what happened after. Daniel has since been deemed unfit to stand trial, so he has instead been admitted into a hospital where he will reside until further notice. In our number 1 spot today, we have Stephen Anthony Lawrence. Even Stevens was another one of those absolutely iconic Disney Channel shows. It is where Shia LaBeouf really got his start, but we all know who truly stole the show, and that is the beloved character of Beans. Beans was played by an actor named Stephen Anthony Lawrence, and his role was originally supposed to just be a featured role, but he quickly turned into a series regular. Beans was an extremely lovable and goofy character that was impossible not to absolutely love, but after the show ended, while we saw a bit of him for a while, he mostly disappeared from our screens, which is a tragic loss. Many people began to worry that he may have possibly fallen down the dark path that many child stars have been known to go down, but there is some good news. That is not the case at all. After Even Stevens ended, Stephen went on to have a few more acting roles, but he began experiencing male pattern baldness at the very young age of 14, which made it extremely difficult to book acting roles as a teenager. After this, when he was in his 20s, Stephen's father unfortunately ended up being diagnosed with cancer and was his primary caregiver. Stephen actually unfortunately lost both of his parents to cancer, and he put his career on hold in order to take care of them both. He explained that being an actor while trying to go through something like that is next to impossible, which I can completely understand. Stephen has obviously lived quite a life for someone so young, and maybe one day we'll see him try his hand at acting again, but for now you can find him on Cameo as well as on YouTube, where he hosts his own show called The Rice and Beans Show.
Number 10. Jason Mewes. Jason Mewes is an American actor, comedian, film producer, and podcaster. He's best known for playing Jay, the vocal half of the duo Jay and Silent Bob. He's also known for his roles in Clerks, Dogma, and Chasing Amy. Unfortunately, Jason has been known for struggling with addiction. In 2001, he failed to appear at a mandatory court hearing stemming from his arrest on charges. A warrant was issued, and Jason was found to be essentially off the grid. In April 2003, he finally resurfaced, appearing in a Freehold, New Jersey courtroom to answer to charges. A judge sentenced him to mandatory rehab for several months, and he was also given probation through 2005. Number 9. Jay Quan. Jarrell C. Jones, better known by his stage name Jay Quan, is an American rapper best known for his 2004 single Tipsy, which peaked peaked at number 2 in 2004. He went missing once in February 2010, sending his record label into a frenzy. Jaquan eventually disappeared for a whole month before Gracie Productions issued a statement asking for any information about his whereabouts. In this bizarre case, even a social media handle at Where is Jaquan surfaced on Twitter with followers leaving tips and info. People even went door to door trying to find any evidence for tracking back to the rapper. After being off the grid for several weeks, Jaquan finally got in touch with Gracie Productions, explaining that he was taking some time to himself, as he sometimes does, not realizing that people would start to worry after a while. I mean, everyone needs some alone time sometimes, although it's very strange that he didn't tell anyone. But interestingly enough, Jaquan's 4th studio album was released less than 3 weeks later. Was it just a publicity stunt? Who knows? Number 8. Chelsea O'Donnell. Chelsea O'Donnell is the daughter of comedian Rosie O'Donnell, and she went missing for nearly a week in the summer of 2015. Rosie first reported Chelsea missing from the Rockland County, New York area on Sunday, August 16th. By Tuesday, there was still no sign of Chelsea, and Rosie turned to social media for help. She posted messages on Twitter and Instagram asking the public for any information they could provide. By Wednesday, police had located Chelsea. She had been hiding out with a 25-year-old convicted criminal who sold illegal substances named Steve Shearer. Chelsea met Steve on Tinder and was apparently with him of her own accord. It would have been nice if she let her family know, but I'm glad she was found safe and nothing bad happened to her. Number 7. Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne is an English singer, songwriter, and television personality. He rose to prominence during the 1970s as the lead vocalist of the heavy metal band Black Sabbath, during which period he adopted the nickname Prince of Darkness. Now, Ozzy has been reported missing more than once. During his first tour with Black Sabbath, his bandmates were worried when they realized he had never checked into his room in their Atlanta hotel. They couldn't find him anywhere, so they actually had to cancel that night's show. The police and local radio stations were informed and put out a search party. Ozzy then suddenly appeared the next day as if nothing had happened. It turned out he had gotten drunk and passed out in the wrong room at the hotel, where he slept through the whole ordeal. Ozzy ended up getting sober, but he went missing again in 2016 when Sharon Osbourne, his wife of more than 40 years, discovered that he had been cheating on her with his hairstylist and kicked him out of the house. Ozzy's adult children grew concerned when they couldn't get in contact with him, believing he might have fallen off the wagon. Within 24 hours, he had been located and claimed to not have touched any alcohol or illegal substances. Number 6. Theo London. Theo London is an American rapper and singer. He is a frequent collaborator of Kanye West, as he was a producer on Donda 2 and was featured on Kanye's 2015 single All Day, which was nominated for several awards, including 2 Grammys. He has also worked in the fashion industry, conducting fashion campaigns for designers like Karl Lagerfeld, Virgil Abloh, and Gucci. And he has also designed shoes for companies including Cole Haan and modeling for Tommy Hilfiger. Theo was reported missing in California by his family on December 28, 2022. According to a statement from his record label, Theo's friends and family had not heard from him since July and were trying to piece together information about his whereabouts. A public message from his father read, "Theo, your dad loves you, son. We miss you, and all your friends and relatives are searching for you. Wherever you are, send us some signal. No matter what, we will come get you, son." On January 5th, Theo's cousin provided an update that he had been located. He said, "We have found Theo, he is safe and well. At this time, the family would love prayers and privacy." Number 5. Casey Kazim. Casey Kazim was an American disc jockey, actor, and radio personality who created and hosted several radio countdown programs, notably American Top 40. He was also the first actor to voice Shaggy Rogers in the Scooby-Doo franchise. Now, a court ruling on May 12, 2014 granted his daughter, Carrie Kazim, temporary conservatorship for her 82-year-old father. Casey, who suffered from advanced Parkinson's disease and could no longer talk, was in the care of his wife, Carrie's stepmother, Jean Kazim, and had not been seen by any of his children by some time. During the trial, Jean's attorney, Craig Marcus, admitted neither he nor his client knew where Casey was, but were under the assumption that he had been removed from the country. Thankfully, Casey was found in Washington State 3 days later after this story broke. He was with his wife visiting another couple at their home. When asked, they said they were
on vacation. Unfortunately, a month later though, he passed away due to his dementia in Washington. Number 4. Nick Stahl. Nick Stahl is an American actor who started out as a child actor. He gained recognition for his performance in the 1993 film The Man Without a Face. He later transitioned into his adult career with roles in the films The Thin Red Line, In the Bathroom, Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. And he also played the character of Jason Riley on Fear the Walking Dead. Now, Nick was reported missing by his estranged wife, Rose Stahl, in May of 2012. She became alerted after she couldn't reach Nick for nearly a week and expressed worry that he might have taken too many illegal substances and died. Thankfully, within a few days after the story hit the media, Nick emerged from a downtown Los Angeles house saying he was fine and that he'd gotten into a 30-day inpatient rehab program. This wasn't the end of the drama, however. In June 2012, he went missing yet again. He apparently decided rehab wasn't for him, so he checked out of the facility and vanished. He wasn't missing for long though the second time around, as he surfaced days later after he bolted from the rehab facility, and his wife Rose reported that he was attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and in a good place. Number 3. Margot Kidder. Margot Kidder was a Canadian-American actress whose career spanned 5 decades. Her accolades included 3 Canadian Screen Awards and 1 Daytime Emmy Award. She's known for her roles in Black Christmas, The Amity Horror, and is most widely known for her performance as Lois Lane in the Superman film series, appearing in the first 4 films. Now, Margot was missing for 4 days in April of 1996 before she was discovered in a stranger's backyard in Glendale, California. She was found dirty and totally disoriented, suffering from what she described as the most public freakout in history. She was on the run and slept on the street for multiple days, she was delusional, and her 2 front teeth were missing. Margot later admitted that she suffered from bipolar disorder but had refused to take any prescribed medication for the condition. During her breakdown, she said she became increasingly paranoid. At one point, she believed that her first husband and the CIA were trying to end her life. When the police picked her up, she finally gave in to treatment for her manic depression. Number 2. Fan Bingbing. Fan Bingbing is a Chinese actress. From 2013 to 2017, she was included as the highest paid celebrity in the Forbes China Celebrity 100 list after ranking in the top 10 every year since 2006, and she appeared on Time's magazine list of the 100 most influential people in 2017. Her early work was in East Asian cinema and television, notably appearing in the drama series My Fair Princess. Her breakthrough came with the film Cell Phone, which was China's highest grossing film of the year. She went on to star in several Chinese films, which included Lost in Beijing, But a Mountain, and Double Exposure. In 2018, she disappeared without a trace. Questions, concerns, and rumors about her whereabouts grew when she was not seen after a last public appearance on July 1st, 2018, and a lack of social media activity after the 23rd of July. She was charged with tax evasion and then fell off the face of the earth. She was presumed missing, and rumors suggested that Fan had been arrested, but they were not confirmed. In August, Fan's manager, Jersey Chong, stated via social media that Fan was never arrested. She then popped back up on October 3rd, 2018 with a statement on social media apologizing to the public for tax evasions after the Chinese authorities ordered her and her companies to pay about $127.4 million US in taxes and penalties to avoid criminal prosecution. And coming in at number 1 is Randy Quaid. Randy Quaid is an actor best known for his roles in A Streetcar Named Desire, Independence Day, and most notably for playing Cousin Eddie in the Vacation movies. In 2009, Randy and his wife were arrested for allegedly defrauding an innkeeper in Santa Barbara by using an invalid credit card to pay a $10,000 bill. They were released on bail and eventually paid most of the bill. However, they repeatedly failed to appear in court and warrants were issued for their arrest. They eventually appeared in court the following year, where the case was dismissed against Randy for lack of evidence. Then in September 2010, Randy and his wife were charged with burglary after they spent 5 days occupying the guest house in a vacant home they once owned in Santa Barbara. They claimed that the home was wrongfully transferred to a third party by the use of forged signature. Warrants for their arrest were issued after they failed to appear in court, and in October 2010 they moved to Vancouver, Canada, where they sought asylum in Canada, stating that they feared for their lives in the United States. People thought they fled due to them running from the law, but they claimed they'd fled to avoid joined the Hollywood Star Whackers, which they claim is a secret organization that takes celebs out or manufactures scandals to discredit them. While being in Canada, no one knew what was going on with them until they were caught in 2015 after the couple attempted to drive across the border into Vermont and were detained by US Customs due to their legal issues.
Starting us off at number 10 is Dorothy Arnold. Although you might not know her now, back in 1910, Dorothy Arnold was a 25-year-old socialite and heiress to a perfume empire. So when the news broke that she suddenly disappeared in the middle of the day without a trace, it was an absolute scandal. Apparently at the time, Arnold had had a huge falling out with her father, who was refusing to let her move out of the house. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to him, she was having a secret affair with a man 20 years her senior and kept a secret P.O. box to write to him. But the really weird part about the whole situation is that after her strange disappearance, Dorothy's dad was allegedly so worried about the bad publicity that the scandal might bring upon the family, he was reluctant to bring the case to the police for several months. Instead, he hired his own PI, who sadly was never able to uncover any leads to where his daughter could be hiding. Of course, at the time, there were plenty of rumors circulating about the socialite's whereabouts. Some believed her secret beau had offed her, while others thought she maybe took her own life. Another popular theory was that she had been secretly pregnant and ran away to avoid social embarrassment. But as she was never found, alive or dead, the mystery continues to this day. Coming in at number 9 is Art Scholl. After a lucrative 18-year career as an air show stunt pilot and an aeronautics instructor at San Bernardino Valley College, Art Scholl pivoted his career into the flashy spotlight of Hollywood and eventually became recognized as the most in-demand stunt pilot in the business. While nowadays we're blessed with CGI, before this technology existed, there was only one way to get a thrilling airplane sequence: a really good pilot. And more often than not, it was Art they called. Over the years, he worked on projects like The Right Stuff, The Great Waldo Pepper, Blue Thunder, The A-Team, Chips, Iron Eagle, and Top Gun. Sadly, it was while filming for Top Gun when Art, while performing an upside-down spin maneuver, lost control of his plane and reported via radio that there was a real problem. From there, it's believed the plane crashed into the Pacific Ocean. Now, to be fair, there is a debate around whether or not Art should be considered a missing person or not, as it's highly unlikely he survived the crash. But after a major investigation was unable to uncover his remains or the plane in question, the truth remained a mysterious, unsolved case. Coming in at number 8 is Slim Wintermute. Back in 1939, the National Collegiate Athletics Association, or NCAA, held its first ever men's college basketball tournament. As is often the case with firsts, the players from the winning team at the University of Oregon, sometimes called Tall Furs, became kind of low-key celebrities in the area. One of these famed Tall Furs was center player Slim Wintermute, because he could dunk the ball, something that was apparently quite the novelty at the time. Sadly, however, after college, Wintermute didn't hit the big leagues. Instead, he ended up working for an airplane manufacturer in Seattle, got married, had 3 kids, and lived a happy, quiet little life. But in October of 1977, he would once again become a well-known man, but this time for a much more tragic reason. At the age of 60, Wintermute and a friend went out to enjoy a little boat trip on a nearby lake. However, the next morning, when his friend awoke, he found that he was left all alone on the vessel. Wintermute nowhere in sight. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to the man, whether he fell overboard or mysteriously ran away. And as no remains were ever discovered, we'll never be able to fully confirm what happened. Coming in at number 7 is Licorice McKechnie. During the late 1960s, the Incredible String Band was a popular, folksy, hippie meets psychedelic rock band that was founded by Robin Williamson, Mike Herron, and Clive Palmer. However, long story short, Clive ended up leaving the band, and the now duo ended up adding their respective girlfriends to the group, and over time they managed to enjoy some moderate success in the lower runs of the Billboard album chart. It was Robinson's girlfriend, Scottish musician musician Christina "Licorice" McKechnie, who by 1968 was considered a fully fledged member, usually performing as a backup singer or percussionist. In fact, she actually performed with the band at the 1969 Woodstock. But in 1972, after her relationship with Robinson had dwindled, McKechnie left the band and went on to other things. A few years went by, she found a new band, got married, got divorced, and then mysteriously vanished in 1987. All that is known is that in 1986, she went back home to Scotland to visit family, but according to her sister, she returned back to America. Her last official sighting is believed to be in 1987, hitchhiking across the Arizona desert, but no one has ever heard from her since. Coming in at number 6 is Glenn Miller. Although he first recorded in 1935, it took a few years, as it does with most artists, for Glenn Miller to establish himself as a great musician. Lucky for Glenn, after some time his band began doing really well for themselves, and after performing at Glen Island Casino in New York, they began to really rise up the ladder. By 1940, they were dominating the radio with hit songs like In the Mood and Tuxedo Junction, eventually earning him a baffling $15 to $20K a week for his career. But his promising career was all forced to a halt in 1942 when he joined the US Army in World War II. Luckily, while assigned, Glenn was able to lead the Army Air Force Band, inspiring and boosting morale for the troops he fought alongside. That was until he mysteriously vanished one chilly December in 1944. Stationed in England at the time, Glenn had learned that his band was to head over to Paris, and so on December 15th, Glenn followed orders and boarded a transport plane that was headed to the French capital. But strangely, Glenn never arrived in Paris that day. In fact, Glenn was never seen again. And even more curious was that no trace of the plane crash was ever found, nor have any remains ever been uncovered. Coming in at number 5 is Solomon Northup. Solomon Northup was the son of a freed slave and a free woman of color, subsequently making him a free man from his birth in 1807. That was until 1841 when he was offered a traveling musician's job and made his way over to Washington, D.C., where slavery was legal, and was drugged, kidnapped, and sold as a slave. From there, he was shipped to New Orleans, where he was eventually purchased by the cruel and brutal Edwin Epps and kept as a slave for 12 years. After breaking free with the help of Samuel Bass, Solomon went on to write the famed novel 12 Years a Slave in 1853, selling 30,000 copies in the first 2 years. Then in 1857, after embarking on a speaking tour in Canada, Solomon was never seen again. There were a number of theories surrounding his disappearance, some believing he became a spy for the Union Army, while most tend to guess he worked on the Underground Railroad aiding other slaves to escape to Canada. While we can safely say he has since died, there was never any documentation made of his death and no official burial, meaning no one really knows where he went or what he was up to in his last few years. Next up at number 4 is Amelia Earhart. Although I would venture to say this woman needs no introduction, just in case you aren't familiar, in 1932, Amelia Earhart was the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean unaccompanied, and was just overall an incredible woman. On top of her 1932 trip, she was one of the first aviators to promote commercial air travel, she wrote best-selling books about her flying experiences, and was instrumental in the formation of the 99s, which was an organization for female pilots. Essentially, she was a super cool badass pilot in the 30s, which made her disappearance all the more bone-chilling. In 1937, Amelia decided to set out on one of the greatest expeditions to date. She was going to be the first woman to fly all the way around the globe. Determined to make history along with her navigator Fred Noonan, Amelia left Miami June 1st and headed towards New Guinea. By the next day, they made it, and from there the plan was to head towards Howland Island, which was a small, uninhabited landmass between Hawaii and Australia. But somewhere en route to the next destination, caught in a bad storm with a low fuel tank, Amelia tragically lost contact with her Coast Guard liaison, and literally literally vanished into thin air. From what anyone has ever been able to find, the plane never landed, and neither her nor Fred were ever seen again. Coming in at our number 3 spot is Theodosia Burr, daughter of the 3rd Vice President of the United States, Aaron Burr. If you have ever heard of a little Broadway musical called Hamilton, or just happen to be a history buff, then you may already be familiar with Miss Theodosia Burr. But one thing they left out in the show was that Theodosia mysteriously vanished from the spotlight in 1813. Apparently, during her time, she turned out to be quite a controversial figure. After Hamilton alluded that her father had an relationship with the girl, it's believed that this is what led to the duel where Burr killed Hamilton, and Theodosia subsequently helping her father flee the country. But from there, her life only got worse. It's believed the young woman suffered uterine cancer, and on top of that, wrote to her doctors sharing symptoms of hysterical fits, seeing figures in the night, witnessing flashes of light, and hearing strange noises. But once her son passed from malaria, sending her into a deep depression, Theodosia decided she was going to go and visit her father, who she desperately missed. One day she boarded the Patriot, a small boat that was scheduled to take her from Georgetown to New York, where her father had recently returned. But curiously, the boat never arrived in New York. In fact, the boat never arrived anywhere as far as anyone could find. It was as if it vanished into another dimension. To this day, the disappearance of Theodosia Burr remains a great mystery. Coming in at our number 2 spot is Ambrose Small. A great Canadian theater magnate from the early 20th century, Ambrose Small remains one of the biggest unsolved cases of a missing person. On December 1st, 1919, Ambrose sold all his theater holdings at a profit of $1.7 million. A large amount of money now, let alone over 100 years ago. The next day, he met with a lawyer, F.W.M. Flock, at the Grand Opera House, and at 5:30 p.m., Flock left, and would be the last person to ever see Ambrose. Later that night, Ambrose mysteriously left his office and disappeared forever. And despite his building being right downtown, police were never able to find anyone who saw him leave. At the time he vanished, Small, who was 53, owned 7 theaters as well as another 62 buildings, was a self-made millionaire, and had no clear motive to be on the run. The mogul took none of his money with him, and without a ransom note or any evidence pointing towards a kidnapping, police were stumped. At first, his wife Teresa assumed he was off gallivanting with a younger woman, but after a few weeks, his lengthy absence began to concern her, so she offered a $50,000 reward to anyone with information regarding his whereabouts if he was found alive, and $15,000 if found dead. The reward was never claimed, and Ambrose was never found. And last up in our number 1 spot is Bobby Dunbar. While he may not have been famous at the time he disappeared, the case of Bobby Dunbar became a national sensation when 8 months later, he was found. The year was 1912, and Bobby Dunbar was a mere 4 years old when he disappeared on a family holiday in Louisiana. Considering his age, people were extremely worried, and so hundreds of volunteers began searching for the little one. Allegedly, people went as far as slicing open the bellies of alligators to check if he had been eaten. Initially, the searches proved fruitless, and it was starting to look more and more like young Bobby was kidnapped, until 8 months later, he was found alive and well in the care of William Walters. At the time, Walters was found guilty for abducting Bobby, after his parents claimed it was their missing son. But Walters insisted he had done no such thing and that the boy was his very own son. However, as Walters and his wife could not afford a lawyer, the courts favored the Dunbar family and sentenced the alleged kidnapper to life in prison. However, as it turns out, he only ended up serving for 2 years. Still, for years it was believed that was all there really was to the story. Until a DNA test in 2004 proved definitively that the boy who had been found under Walter's care was not Bobby Dunbar, meaning that it very likely really was the son of William Walter, and that Bobby's parents somehow mistook this boy for their own son, or at least knew that they were lying about it not being theirs. But scariest of all, it meant that the young Bobby was never actually found.
Starting off at our number 10 spot, we have Taylor with an E. Last year, near the end of the year, Taylor with an E posted a TikTok and then kind of ghosted the app for a while, and it had people super freaked out and wondering what happened. The video was of her in Germany, where she is not from, and there were some mysterious sounds from outside of the room that she was in. She was clearly really freaked out in the video, and when she stopped posting after, people began to speculate that something terrible might have happened to her. She commented a few times on her own video explaining that her sister had told her to never open the door for anyone in the area that they were in, and also that she was home alone for the next 2 hours, which obviously made her stressful situation even scarier. Well, we eventually heard from Taylor again, thank goodness, and while she hasn't actually addressed what happened to her on TikTok, it's good to know that she is safe. There is a rumor that people may have actually ended up breaking into the house, and that maybe she isn't allowed to speak about it if there's an investigation going on, but that has yet to be confirmed. In our number 9 spot today we have Elle. The TikTok user SigsFR, whose name is Elle, gave her followers a huge scare earlier this year. Elle posted a video on TikTok of her bruised body, saying that she had been kidnapped. She said that she didn't know exactly where she was, but knew that she was somewhere in Arkansas. In the comments of a video, she said that she knew the man that had kidnapped her and that his last name was Colarelli. And people on TikTok began contacting the Arkansas police. Elle also said that she would not be posting any more videos on TikTok because she said that she knew the man was about to take her life. People were absolutely freaking out and blowing the story up. People suspected the man she said is her kidnapper to be her ex-boyfriend, and people were also saying that she was using Morse code messages. Elle said that she couldn't call the police because her kidnapper would be able to hear the call, and this was the first red flag for people since there's a ton of ways to contact the authorities. The next red flag was the fact that Elle posted her Venmo, and people actually started donating. To get to the end of this story, basically the Arkansas State Police did end up investigating to find out what was going on, and they actually ended up finding Elle. It turns out she faked the whole thing. They haven't released a ton of details on exactly what was going on, but Elle has stopped posting on TikTok, which is probably the right move for now. I feel really bad for the people who were worried and who sent her money. In our number 8 spot today we have LaCarica McNeil. Last year, 11-year-old Memphis resident LaCarica was reported missing. She was last seen on a weekend morning leaving her home and hadn't made any contact with her mom after that, which is obviously a great cause for concern because she's so young. She had apparently left her home with an older man that she had met on TikTok, which really just heightened the urgency of the case. The police description that was released after her disappearance said that she was last seen wearing a shirt with hearts on it and that she was just 4 feet 3 inches and only 55 pounds. This really paints a picture for just how small and potentially helpless she may have been. This investigation ended up prompting the question, how safe is TikTok really? In an amazing turn of events, LaCarica ended up being found and returned safe and sound, which is truly the best outcome for this really scary situation. I'm so glad that she ended up being okay and that this story has a happy ending. In our number 7 spot today we have Arlene Martinez. Earlier this year, a TikTok user was away from the platform for a while, but it wasn't long before fans found out what happened and it was all over the news. A 20-year-old TikToker named Arlene was filming a video for the platform that was supposed to depict a fake kidnapping. The video was a larger production with at least 10 people involved in the filming on this day. Arlene was tied to a chair and was acting out a scene in which she was struggling with the people who had fake kidnapped her. In a really sad turn of events, for some unknown reason, a loaded handgun was used as a prop in the video, and it ended up firing, shooting and killing Arlene. There was actually a video posted of what the scene was like before this fatal moment. There has been a Facebook memorial page set up for people who love and miss her to go and share their memories with others. Moving on to our number 6 spot. Okay, so this one is about a person who posts on TikTok, but they are more successful on Vigo Vigo, which is an extremely similar app that is made by the same creators of TikTok. Earlier this year in January, a 21-year-old TikToker and Vigo star who goes by the name Jasmine on the apps went missing from Delhi, where she had traveled to for a performance. Jasmine's husband filed a missing persons report on January 7th. He said that she had left on December 31st for the performance and her phone was switched off on December 2nd and no one had heard from her since. Police quickly began their investigation and news began to spread of her disappearance. 10 days after the husband had filed the missing persons report, we finally heard some news. Jasmine actually ended up resurfacing and told a local channel that she had to run away because her husband and family-in-law tortured her. She said she never disappeared and that if you checked her husband's phone records, you would see that they had been in contact. This story is so crazy and has so many twists and turns in it. I'm really glad that Jasmine was able to get herself out of a dangerous situation and then she ended up being okay. Moving on to number 5 and our halfway mark. This story is a little bit different but is super interesting. In 2016, a woman came home to find that her husband had left the house that they shared with their 2 children. She tried as hard as she could to find him but was never able to find out where he went. She even filed the missing persons report with the police, but to no avail. Fast forward 3 years later to 2019 and a family relative thinks that she spots the husband in a video on TikTok. She of course quickly forwards it to the wife for confirmation. After watching the TikTok, she realizes that it is her husband and shows it to the police right away. The police ended up being able to track him down and confirm that it really was him. It's so crazy how the For You page literally helped solve a missing persons case. Moving on to number 4. In July of last year, 2 teenagers attempted an extremely dangerous TikTok video. Danish and Ashik were out for an evening walk when they arrived at a bridge. On the bridge was a group of people around their age who were performing different kinds of stunts and tricks to film for TikToks. The boys decided to join in on the fun and Danish ended up climbing onto the railing of the bridge before diving into the water below while Ashik filmed. After he captured the video, Ashik followed his friend and climbed over the railing to jump in the water as well. Danish ended up being rescued immediately by local divers who luckily just happened to be in the area, but unfortunately Ashik could not be located, even by the authorities once they were called. Lots of people tried to help in the search but were unsuccessful. It's really sad that what was supposed to be harmless fun turned into something so sad and so scary. Moving on to number 3. Okay. This one is a little different again, but I swear it is worth it because this story is pretty wild. Earlier this year, a group of teenagers were on a beach on Seattle to play around and shoot some TikToks. They ended up spotting something and went to investigate. Of course, documenting the whole thing on video to later be edited into a TikTok. As they approached, they realized that it was a suitcase and they thought that there might be money inside. As they got closer to the suitcase, they realized it smelled super bad. One girl ended up opening up the suitcase and it shows something wrapped in a garbage bag. This is when the teens rightfully decided to call the police before investigating any further. The police came and searched the whole area and found another bag as well. It turns out that the bags actually contained 2 bodies. This is where the police investigation began and shortly after led police to the killer. The bodies were identified as couple Jessica Lewis and Austin Wenner, and it turns out that their landlord was responsible for their deaths. I guess it was some dispute over unpaid rent, which is really not a good enough reason to kill people. I'm glad these teens did the right thing and called the police so that justice could be brought for the families of the victims. In our number 2 spot today we have Anna Maskovich, aka Ref Batch. For the last 10 years, Anna has uploaded upwards of 20 videos a day to YouTube and ended up joining TikTok when it became available. Her videos tend to be a bit bizarre and are either her angrily rambling in an unintelligible mixture of Russian and English that has people who are fluent in both absolutely stumped as to what she is saying. There are a few phrases that people have been able to make out that are along the lines of her being angry at and afraid of the government, as well as being afraid of being kidnapped. The other videos she uploads are her interpretive dancing, usually in the woods and looking directly into the camera. There's a dancer who has the same name as her and her performances stopped sometime in late 2008, but there aren't any photos to verify that it's the same person for sure. People began to speculate that she may have some form of schizophrenia, but of course that's just an internet diagnosis. In 2014, someone who claimed to be her husband, who had other videos of her, explained that Anna had actually been missing after she had been taken away for speaking poorly of the Russian government. He said that she had been taken to some sort of psychiatric institute where they gave her psychotropic drugs in order to make her stop speaking out about the government. Well, this has yet to be proven for sure. It is a pretty crazy story and kind of insane to know that while he's missing his wife, he sees all of these videos of her. I hope we get a concrete answer to this someday because there really is a lot going on. There's a lot more to this story that I don't have time to cover, but the YouTuber Atrocity Guide has an amazing video on all of it that I would highly recommend you guys go and check out after you're done watching this video. In our number 1 spot today, we have Sarah Turney. Okay, so this one isn't a TikToker who went missing, but it is a missing persons case that TikTok helped close the case on, so please don't get mad at me because it is really interesting. Sarah Turney was 12 years old when her 17-year-old sister Alyssa went missing. This happened on May 17, 2001, and ever since that day, Sarah has known that it was her dad, Michael, who was Alyssa's stepfather. There was never anyone charged with Alyssa's disappearance and presumed death, but Sarah just knew. Sarah began to post on TikTok as well as her website dedicated to the case, all of the evidence that she had pointing towards her dad. Things like the fact that he would follow her around and record her, and that there was at least one hidden camera inside of the house. Things like how he was the one who unexpectedly picked her up from school and was the last one to see her on that day. You know, just general uncomfortable, creepy things. Michael also kept changing his story about that day and night, which just adds another layer of suspicion. In an amazing turn of events, Sarah's voice was finally heard, and in August of this year, her father ended up being charged with second-degree. Sarah of course plans to attend every court hearing and every day of trial when it begins. I couldn't be happier for her, and I really hope that she sees justice served for her and Alyssa.
Up first in the number 10 spot is Jim Robinson. A boxer from Miami, Florida in the 1960s, Sweet Jimmy as he was called in the ring, came into the spotlight after he was the 4th person to professionally fight the great Muhammad Ali. On February 7th, 1961, Cassius Clay, who later became Muhammad Ali, was supposed to be fighting a man named Willie Galat, but Galat ended up turning down the offer after finding out he was going to be paid $500 less than his opponent. So down a fighter, the club promoter Chris Dundee, in a last-minute switch-around, recruited Sweet Jimmy instead. Now, the good news for Robinson was that he got his claim to fame that night. However, the bad news was that Ali outweighed him by 16.5 pounds and won by a knockout by a minute 34 into the first round. Through the years, Muhammad and Sweet Jimmy remained good friends though, often seen together around Miami driving around in Ali's pink Cadillac. So you can imagine the shock when out of nowhere, Robinson was gone. After retiring in 1963, Robinson came back into the limelight for a quick stint in '68 before finally calling it quits for good. From there, he laid pretty low and lived a normal life until he was tracked down by Sports Illustrated in 1979 for an interview about his life. Little did his writer know though that this would be the last anyone saw Jim Robinson, as ever since that day his whereabouts have been unknown. Ever since, there have been many attempts and investigations by local police to find him, but sadly none have proven successful. He quite literally vanished without a trace. Next up at number 9 is Ian McIntosh. After rising up to the rank of Lieutenant Commander in the British Royal Navy, during the 60s and 70s, Ian pivoted passions and began turning the adventures of his Navy career into action novels such as A Slaying in September. After his novels were well received by the masses, Ian tried his hand in the TV biz, writing for shows such as the critically acclaimed BBC drama Warship, as well as Thundercloud and The Sandbaggers. Sadly, however, less than a month before his 39th birthday, Ian disappeared and was never to be seen again. On July 7th, 1969, while on a trip to Alaska with his partner Susan and friend Graham, who was flying the plane, a distress signal was sent out around 6 p.m. by Barbara. Apparently the plane plane was approaching the northeast corner of Kodiak Island, and so an air traffic control officer sent off the Coast Guard to help. However, when the military arrived at the plane's last reported location, there was no sign of Ian, his plane, or the rest of his crew. Even stranger was that there was no sign of a crash either. There was no debris, no casualties, and no survivors. And even after searching for days, they never got closer to finding where Ian had vanished off to. They quite simply disappeared, and they, along with their plane, were never seen again. Next up at number 8 is Pierre Bianconi. Throughout the 80s and 90s, Pierre Bianconi was one of the biggest high-level pro soccer players in France. But what made him so famous wasn't a huge amount of goals or a charming personality that people fell in love with. In fact, you could say he was more notorious than famous. Due to his routinely aggressive and unruly behavior, Pierre racked up countless yellow and red penalty cards over the years, and it seemed that he remained unfazed by the increasingly bad facade he was creating for himself. One incident in particular in 1985 earned him great notoriety after he slapped an opposing player and took the red card that was held up to him by the official, ripped it up, and then proceeded to headbutt the referee. Thankfully, the ref only suffered a bloody nose, but Pierre's penalty was a 6-month ban from competitive soccer. But of course, what really made Pierre the most famous of all was when he vanished without a trace in 1993. Very little is known about the events surrounding his disappearance, only that Pierre was last spotted in the port city of Bastia in December of '93, where his car was later found without any trace of its owner. Coming in at number 7 is Jimmy Hoffa. From a very young age, Jimmy was a passionate union activist for America's largest union, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, or IBT. In fact, by his mid-20s, he began being recognized as a fairly important regional figure, and by 52, he was even elected as the vice president. Fast forward a few years to 1957, and Jimmy had worked his way up to be president of the union, a position he held for 14 years. But the thing about Jimmy was that he was not a straight and narrow kind of man. In fact, he was the exact opposite. Despite being a popular figure, it was well known that Jimmy had his hand in some dangerous pies, and was wrapped up in quite a few illegal activities with the mafia. Eventually, these crimes caught up to him, and in '64, Jimmy was convicted for jury tampering and bribery of a grand juror. But it only got worse from there. While on bail during his appeal, Jimmy was convicted in a second trial, this time for conspiracy and mail-in wire fraud. He tried for 4 years to appeal, but when all was said and done, Jimmy was facing a whopping 13 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. In 1967, he went to jail, still working as the president of the union from the inside, but a mere 4 years into his sentence, President Nixon pardoned him and allowed for his release. However, despite being expected to return back to his union duties, Jimmy strangely disappeared. Last seen at a restaurant parking lot in Detroit, neither Jimmy or his body has ever been recovered. There is some speculation that the mafia could have heard of his release and gotten to him, but we will never really know what happened to Jimmy. Coming in at number 6 is Zahir Rehan. A famous novelist in what was at the time called East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, Zahir rose to international fame in 1971 with his 20-minute documentary entitled Stop Genocide. The documentary was released in the middle of the Bangladesh Liberation War and depicted the plight of refugees fleeing the country's war with Pakistan, shining a light on the harsh military regime that killed roughly 3 million people. Now, as you can probably imagine, despite receiving critical acclaim from other parts of the world, there was one place that was not a fan of his spotlight on the war: Pakistan. And unwittingly, Zahir had put himself in the spotlight of some very powerful people. Then in January of 1972, barely a month after the war had ended and Bangladesh was declared independent, Rehan went missing. The most tragic part of it all is that apparently Rehan was actually out looking for his brother, who he believed was abducted by the Pakistani military 2 days prior, only to vanish himself. Many believe that he was kidnapped along with his brother for supporting Bangladeshi independence, but as there's no evidence, witnesses, or body to be found, no one actually knows what happened to the poor man. Coming in at number 5 is John Brisker. In the early 1970s, John was an all-star player in the ABA and worked his way up the ladder until he found himself in the NBA. By 1972, John was playing for the Seattle Supersonics, but soon his stats began to drop below the usual standard. It seems this downhill trajectory developed into a rather aggressive personality, and John quickly became known as the man you did not want to be on the wrong side of. In fact, during his professional career, he became notorious for needing to be removed from the court. Over the next 2 years, his playtime was limited until sadly he was cut from the team in 1975, and little else is known about what happened after he was cut, except that he and his girlfriend had a daughter in 78. Then, later that year, John decided to switch up his career. After a few failed business ideas, John decided he was going to head over to Africa to start an import-export venture, and so he did. Then on April 11th, 1978, John called his girlfriend from Uganda, but that was the last time he was ever heard from. What happened to John remains a mystery to this day. His remains have never been found, and no one has seen him since he left for Uganda. But the strangest part of it all is that the US State Department could not actually confirm if Brisker had even traveled to Africa in the first place, and have gone on record stating that they believe he is still out there somewhere. Coming in at number 4 is Weldon Keys. Throughout his time in the hot seat, it seemed like Weldon was always on the verge of making it big. He knew all the right people, went to all the right parties, and he worked very consistently as a poet, painter, playwright, pianist, and filmmaker. But for whatever reason, he never seemed to really get his name in lights. His greatest success was The Poet Follies, a musical revue meets burlesque show that premiered in January of 1955, and although Poet Follies earned him great notoriety, his other projects did not find the same kind of support. Then, later that year, the permanent home for the Poet Follies was closed by the fire marshal just days before the premiere of a new one-act play, devastating Weldon to his core. All this effort, with little to no recognition, began to get to Weldon's head, and that paired with his divorce the year prior, slowly but surely began to send him into a deep depression. By early July, his depression was worsening, and he began talking of running off to Mexico to start a new life and never return. However, no one really took this claim that seriously, believing he was just in a bad headspace. But on July 19th of 1955, Weldon disappeared forever. All that was found was a deserted car near the Golden Gate Bridge, his body nowhere in sight. While some assumed he took his own life, the strange part was that his wallet, sleeping bag, and an account savings book with over $800 in it went missing along with him. And the truth of his disappearance remains a mystery to this day. Coming in at number 3, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Author of the famed children's novella The Little Prince, Antoine was not just a writer of fantastical books, but also fancied himself somewhat of a pilot. Although it seems that he may have been better with the typewriter, as he was the victim of not one, but 2 disappearances while flying an aircraft. The first time it happened was in 1935, and Antoine, along with his mechanical engineer on board, crash-landed into the Libyan desert. Despite surviving the crash, the pair had only about 1 day's worth of fluids, and very limited food. And by the second day, they both began to experience vivid hallucinations from dehydration. However, after 4 days, and on the brink of death, the pair were found by a Bedouin and returned back to safety. Believe it or not, this did not seem to deter Antoine from flying, and in World War II, desperate to do his part for his country, he volunteered his skills as a pilot for the Allies. However, it was quickly discovered he was not quite up to par with the other pilots, often crashing into trees or winding up in the wrong coordinates. Eventually, he became a pretty big liability to the Allies, but still he insisted on doing his part for the greater good. But on his 10th mission in July of 1944, Antoine took off over the Mediterranean and was never seen again. It is debated that his flight may have crashed, but neither him or his body has ever been found, so no one truly knows what happened to him that fateful day. Coming in at number 2 is Barbara Fawcett. Barbara became a household name when in 1927, at just 12 years old, she published her first novel, The House Without Windows. Lucky for her, her father was the editor of a publishing company, and so with his help, her novel was sent out into the world. Incredibly, the young writer received critically acclaimed reviews from the New York Times, among other companies, and everyone that read her novel agreed that young Barbara was going to be the next great American novelist. And to her credit, she kind of was. 2 years later, she published another novel entitled The Voyage of the Normandy, once again with rave reviews across the board. However, sadly, after the second novel's release, her father abandoned both her and her mother for another woman, leaving them virtually penniless in the midst of the Great Depression. By age 16, she worked as a typist, trying to scrape by like everyone else, until 1931 when she met her soon-to-be husband Nick Rogers. After a few years of travel, the pair settled down and married in 1934, and although initially happy, by 1937 she was beginning to express her dissatisfaction to close friends, believing that her beloved was being unfaithful. Then on December 9th, 1939, after an argument with her husband, Barbara left the house with $30 to her name, an equivalent of like $500, and was never seen again. But what is especially mysterious is that her husband didn't report her missing for 2 whole weeks. And even then, the media wasn't clued into the disaster until 1966. The mother was famous for believing that the investigation was not thorough enough, but to this day, her body has never been recovered, and police were never able to figure out where Barbara ran away to. Last up in our number 1 spot is Ilenia Carisi. From the moment Ilenia was brought into this world, she was already pretty much famous. Born in 1970 to hugely famous Italian singers Albano and Romina Carisi, it wasn't long before Ilenia joined the family biz and began working as an entertainer herself. By 1984, the young performer made her debut in an Italian film, Champagne in Paradiso, which coincidentally starred both her parents before later appearing in 1989 as the letter turner for the Italian version of The Wheel of Fortune. However, Ilenia's real dream was to be a writer, so in college she decided to study literature, which, as it turns out, she was really good at. However, as many people in their early 20s do, Ilenia decided to take a break from her studies and travel solo around the world with nothing but a backpack and a journal. She began in South America and worked her way up to Belize, where she stayed for a few months. Then on Boxing Day of 1993, she got on a bus and headed for New Orleans, Louisiana. But tragically, weeks later in January of 94, 23-year-old Ilenia was gone, and no one knew where to find her. She had last been spotted in the haunted French Quarter, and despite the local authorities' great efforts, neither her nor any remains were ever recovered.
Starting off this list, we have Jenny Sook. Jenny was a popular YouTuber with 306,000 subscribers. She posted videos of her singing covers and some of her own original music. She has a beautiful voice and is usually stuck in more of an R&B genre. Her last video was uploaded in June of 2014, which was 6 years ago. She resurfaced for a quick moment on Twitter and Instagram in 2017, but has been radio silent ever since. There aren't a ton of speculations on where she went or what happened, but some people believe that maybe she is now creating music under an alias, or that she quit the music business altogether. Whatever happened to her, I hope she is doing well and is safe and sound. In our number 9 spot today, we have the YouTuber C-Day. Before I jump into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button if you're liking this video so far. It really helps us out. C-Day was an extremely popular Fortnite YouTuber, and people loved his videos that really showed his personality and just how good he was at the game. He started as a Destiny player and really thrived doing that, but one day when the Destiny servers went down, he picked up Fortnite. He started playing Fortnite just as it was increasing in popularity, and eventually switched from playing both Destiny and Fortnite to just playing Fortnite. A few months later, his channel absolutely blew up. His subscriber count tripled and his views were huge. Shortly after this blow up, he began to take random hiatuses. In 2018, C-Day disappeared for a month, and when he came back, he explained that he had a tough month moving houses, but at least he came back. A little later in 2018, he took another break from uploading, but this time it was for 7 weeks. When he came back, he didn't really give a reason for his break, not that he has to, but then he went back to his regular uploads. For a third time, he disappeared off the platform for another month, and this time it actually began to lose him subscribers. He eventually came back, just like all the times before, and promised that he wouldn't disappear again, but all his videos were posted very sporadically and were of different games. In 2020, C-Day has only uploaded 6 videos and his last upload was all the way back in February. This is definitely the longest he's been away from the platform, which has us wondering, where the heck did he go? Well, luckily C-Day has posted on Instagram a few times this year, so we know he is safe. He posted a story that said, "The longer I am away from YouTube, the harder it is to come back. I can't stand it." The last we heard from him was on Instagram in August, and he explained that he would be coming back, but he wouldn't be playing Fortnite anymore, which is pretty understandable for him to want to move on. He said he would start playing games like Fall Guys, but we haven't seen any uploads since. It's very possible that 2020 just got to him, or maybe he just lost his passion for uploading videos, both of which are extremely valid. Wherever he is and whatever he is up to, I hope he's doing well, and maybe we'll see him come back sometime in the future. In our number 8 spot today we have the YouTuber Fearless. He started out as a Call of Duty YouTuber who uploaded videos of just his gameplay and not even any audio from a microphone. Slowly his channel grew and he began to add commentary and audio, and on April 21st, 2017, he uploaded a video called Kicked from FaZe that made his channel absolutely blow up. That video has almost 9 million views alone, but when Fortnite came out he started playing it and his channel blew up even more, until he was at the point where he was getting 20 to 30 million views on most of his uploads. This is all to say he was extremely successful and very popular. He began trying to play other games to upload, but those videos weren't getting as many views, so he stuck with what people wanted to see. Eventually the videos just stopped coming. His WikiTube page said that he passed away on December 12th, 2019, so people began to freak out thinking that he was dead, but that is not the case. 10 months ago was the last time he uploaded a video, but he has a fairly secret second channel that he live streamed himself playing Fortnite on just 6 months ago. Fans could tell during this live stream that he sounded very different. Everyone was super worried about him and thought that he even sounded like he was crying at the end of the stream. He said he left for personal reasons and that he was so nervous about coming back that his hands were literally shaking. In September of this year, he changed his profile picture on YouTube, which some people speculated meant that he was coming back, and a few months ago he posted a message saying, "People think I quit. Nah, I just need time. I don't like talking about personal things, so I don't want to get into it. Just remember that you never know what others are going through. I'm trying. Sorry. I love you." It's very obvious that Fearless just needed a break, because after all, he is a human being with a lot of other stuff going on. It is also virtually impossible to please everyone when 30 million people are watching your videos, and maybe that pressure just really got to him. In our number 7 spot today we have the YouTuber Just Rain. His real name is Jasmeet, and he is a Canadian YouTuber who used his South Asian roots to inspire his content for his videos. He covers topics from pop culture parodies to commentary on race and his struggles with racism. His last video came in December of 2018, and after all of this, all of his social media accounts became inactive. There are some speculations as to where he could have gone. Some people believe that he may have given up YouTube in order to pursue a more normal life and get married and raise a family, but some others believe that he is working on something behind the scenes, and that is why he has shifted his focus. Well, it's kind of crazy to be making this video today because literally just a few days ago there was an announcement that gave us a conclusion to this story and some answers to the questions we've all been asking. Jasmeet has been working on a new comedy series that is set to come out in 2021 called Late Bloomer. He's producing the series but also acting in it, and it will apparently follow a similar storyline to what his life has been like. I couldn't be happier to know that he is okay and to hear that his YouTube hiatus has been for something so exciting for him, and I can't wait to see Late Bloomer when it comes out. In our number 6 spot today we have Alan Tutorials. This channel is probably the weirdest thing I have ever seen in my life. The videos are of a guy named Alan who is making tutorials around his house, but they are all strange. I don't even know how to explain them to you, so you'll just have to go and watch them for yourself. As time goes on, his videos only get stranger. He does things like cutting his hand on a rusty nail but continuing to film the video with his bloody hand, and there's one where he destroys his entire apartment and then gets locked outside, and another one where it honestly seems like he's been kidnapped and is in the back of a moving van. His last upload was on December 12th, 2014, and then he just disappeared. The videos had me so creeped out that when I went digging on this one, I was kind of surprised to find out what happened. Well, it turns out that Alan in these videos isn't real. I mean, he is real, but he is a character being played by his creator, Alan Resnick. Alan created this series in 2011 and it blew up, with his last video getting 2 million views. Since the Alan Tutorials page has been inactive, the real Alan has still been working as a writer and actor, and his latest short film called May I Please Enter was released in 2018. It's good to know that the guy in the Alan Tutorials video was not real, because he was doing some pretty disturbing stuff, but it's even better to know that the real Alan is doing well. At our 5th spot and our halfway mark, we have the YouTuber called Magic of Rahat. I'm not sure if you guys remember this guy, but he started on YouTube in 2007, and it started with card trick videos and then moved to prank videos. In 2014, he played a prank on a homeless man named Eric. He gave Eric a fake lottery ticket and told him that he had won $1,000. Eric, being the seemingly sweet man that he is, wanted to split the prize with Rahat, but of course he declined the offer. This video blew up and so many people wanted to donate to Eric, so a GoFundMe was set up with a goal of $20,000, but it ended up reaching over double that goal. A few months later, another video was uploaded with Eric, and this time it was a video of Rahat giving Eric a house that was paid for by all of the people who wanted to support Eric. Flash forward a few years and this really took a turn. In February of 2018, a video of someone interviewing Eric was posted, and Eric let it spill that he didn't receive any of the money from the GoFundMe and that the house he was given needed constant maintenance. Eric said that he only stayed in the house for 2 months, and then the house was sold for $5,000 less than what was raised in the fundraiser. By the end of April 2018, Rahat had no activity on his channel anymore. On June 5th, 2018, Rahat posted saying that the money had been transferred to Eric and that he would post the bank statements to prove it, but that post has since been deleted. On June 11th, 2018, Eric had another video come out where he explained he didn't want any more of the drama and that he forgave Rahat for not sending any of the money, but later in July changed his mind and began accusing Rahat again. This whole whirlwind is finally reaching its conclusion, as on October 16th of this year, Rahat finally tweeted, "I'm still here." He ended up tweeting the proof of him transferring the funds, and on November 19th, he ended up releasing a video where he explained everything that happened and all the proof to back it up. Apparently, Rahat is now living in West Virginia, where he invests in real estate and owns a chain of coffee shops. Maybe he'll return to YouTube, but I could totally understand if he didn't want to. I'm just so glad that this whole thing with him and Eric has finally been cleared up. Moving on to number 4, we have Lael Hansen. Lael was a popular YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers and was best known for her reaction videos to rap and hip hop music. Her last video was almost a year ago. It was uploaded on December 8th, 2019, and it was titled RIP Juice WRLD. In the video, she was obviously really upset about his passing because she was a friend and fan of his, and of course his death was very tragic. After this video, suddenly all of her social media profiles either went private, or on YouTube she deleted all of her videos and changed all of her profile pictures to just a black screen. While we still don't know where she is or what happened, the fact that she took the time to do this might be a good sign, since it means that this social media break might have been planned and a decision she made on her own, rather than her disappearing because she was in danger. There are a lot of speculations and rumors about where she could have gone. One rumor says that she was at an album release party last year and things got a little bit wild between her and someone else, and that caused her boyfriend to break up with her, which made her need to take a break from social media because her boyfriend was the one who edited all of her videos. This doesn't seem true though, because on her boyfriend's Twitter he still has a link to her website, and I'm sure that if she had cheated on him he probably would have taken it off of his profile, and she also probably could have just hired an editor if they had broken up. Others speculate that the passing of Juice WRLD was just a lot for her to handle and she needed to take a break for a while, which is so understandable. It might be a combination of the vicious rumor being spread about her cheating on her boyfriend as well as the loss of a friend that really just pushed her to the edge. I hope she's beginning to feel better, and I hope that her break from social media has really helped her with whatever she needs. In our number 3 spot today we have Victoria Flamel. Victoria was a Danish vlogger who posted content for people to relate to. She had a very popular channel, but in 2017 she just kind of vanished. She hasn't posted anything on Twitter or YouTube since 2016, and her last Instagram post was in 2017, so where did she go? Well, as of what I could find, no one really knows. The biggest rumor is that she got doxxed and needed to leave the public eye. Getting doxxed is when someone finds out all of your personal information, such as your full name, your address, your phone number, the names of your family, and then they post it on the internet for everyone to see. This is not only super invasive, but also unbelievably dangerous. Many people believe that this is why she left all of her platforms, and I truly don't blame her. It would be super scary to have all of your personal information out there, and I'm sure that she was pretty scared for her and her family's safety. This is all just speculation though, and I hope that she's been able to get the privacy that she obviously needed and deserves, and maybe one day we'll get a solid answer on what happened to her. Heading down to number 2, we have the user Let's Play Guitar. This channel started back in 2014 and gained about 1.65 million subscribers. The channel consisted of this guy teaching people how to play songs on guitar, and it was truly just a nice and wholesome educational content. His last upload came on July 3rd, 2018, and then he just vanished. No one really knows what happened to this guy or where he went, but rumors began to spread that he could have started a new channel called Fingerstyle Club. The new channel featured the exact same thumbnail as Let's Play Guitar and had similar videos, but the voice of the person really just doesn't sound the same, and also why would somebody start a new channel when they already have 1.5 million subscribers? In an even creepier and more sad rumor, some people believe that he may have passed away, and that is why his channel was left inactive. All in all, we really don't know where he went, but I hope he just got busy with his life and decided to stop posting, but that he is totally okay. In our number 1 spot today, we have Kate Yup. Kate was a mukbang ASMR YouTuber who started on the platform in 2018. For some reason, she was always blindfolded in her videos, but maybe that was just to protect her identity. Shortly before she stopped uploading videos, fans began to notice some strange behavior and bruises on her arms. This of course got people worried and rumors began to fly. People began to dive deep into her videos, and people could swear that she was sending messages asking for help and saying that she was eating as if she hadn't been fed for a long time. This of course made people believe that she had been kidnapped and was being forced to make these videos. Before she disappeared, she did make a comment saying that she was fine and that no one was forcing her to eat, but fans still aren't convinced. Kate's last video was posted on November 10th of 2019, and it featured her tooth literally falling out of her mouth, which then fueled the fire even more on this kidnapping conspiracy. At the end of the day, I don't know where Kate Yup went or what happened to her, but I really believe that these far-fetched rumors are absolutely not true and that she is still thriving and eating delicious foods every day.
Starting us off at number 10 is Scott Smith. Back in the 80s, one of the biggest bands was Canadian rock group Loverboy. I mean, Working for the Weekend is still played on radio stations today. So when one of the founding members, Scott Smith, seemingly vanished from reality, there were lots of questions. Back in November of 2000, after playing with his band in Vancouver at a benefit, Smith, along with 2 other friends and his girlfriend, set sail for Mexico on a 37-foot sailboat. As they were sailing down the coast, nearing San Francisco, the weather started to get rough and the waves started to get dangerous. Then one large wave, roughly 20 feet in size, knocked over Smith and sent him shooting off the deck of the vessel into the water. His friends on the boat were not hit, but were in shock about what they had just seen. They searched for the man overboard pole, but it had been taken by the waves along with their friend. Within 20 minutes, the Coast Guard helicopters arrived and dispatched 2 search boats that scoured for hundreds of miles to no avail. Still, his family were bound and determined to find him, so they even paid for a private search. Unfortunately, that too was fruitless. To this day, Smith's remains have never been uncovered, and no one knows if he truly did lose his life to the sea. Coming in at number 9, Daniel Lynn Lagerlof. While for North Americans he might not be the most well-known on the list, once upon a time he was one of the most acclaimed directors and writers in Sweden. But his rise to stardom all came to a crashing halt in 2011 when Daniel was out scouting locations for a new thriller project and disappeared forever. Last anyone knew, Daniel had gone to the beautiful nature reserve of Chirpanan, a remote island all by himself. Now, why he went all by himself, no one knows, but according to his friends, he was simply going off to explore the island and planned to return. Tragically, he never did. To this day, his whereabouts are still a mystery, as no remains have ever been found, and no one knows what actually happened to him. There is one theory that he slipped and fell into the water, but again, no body has been found. Tragically, he has a wife and family, all of whom are hoping that he will still be found, but to this day, no investigations have proved successful. Next up at number 8 is Harold Holt. Nearly 2 years into his term as Australia's 17th Prime Minister, Harold Holt vanished into thin air. Back in December of 1967, Holt, who had always been an avid lover of the ocean, decided to set out for a little trip across with 4 other companions. However, on the way back to Portsea, Holt insisted that the group stop by a small remote beach for a quick swim after lunch. Holt, who was a strong swimmer, said that he knew the waters like the back of his hand and that he had done it many times before. But still, the weather was rough that day, and so only one of his friends agreed to take the dip with him. His friend stayed close to shore, but Holt took a different approach and decided to venture out further, but seemingly got caught up in a wave and in the blink of an eye was gone. To this day, his body has never been found, although a 2005 investigation concluded that he could have drowned. This investigation, however, didn't stop many from theorizing that the leader had faked his own death or that he was some sort of secret CIA agent. While it does sound a little ridiculous at first, he's never been found, so I mean, the truth is still up for debate. Coming in at number 7 is Jim Sullivan. He might not have been the biggest name in his time, but Jim Sullivan definitely had a cult following back in the 60s and 70s, which made his disappearance all the more mysterious. In March of 1975, Sullivan was heading out to Nashville for what he hoped was gonna be his big break into the industry. But for whatever reason, Sullivan never made it to Tennessee. Instead, his car was found abandoned in the desert in New Mexico, and his wallet, clothes, and guitar were all found left in a nearby motel. And as for Sullivan, he was gone without a trace. Now, I don't know many musicians that would go anywhere for long periods of time without their guitar, a sentiment that every single one of Sullivan's friends and bandmates echoed. All of them explained that had he planned to vanish, that would have been the one thing he would take with him. But here is where it gets a little extra strange. Sullivan's most well-known album was called UFO, and on the record were songs seemingly telling the story about driving into the desert and being abducted by aliens. And while of course there is no evidence to prove that that really happened, his body has never been found, and there's no evidence to prove it didn't either. I mean, honestly, who knows? Next up at number 6 is Bison Dele. Once a firecracker player for the NBA, at the age of 30, Bison, who had changed his name from Brian Williams, unexpectedly retired from the game and ran away to live a carefree, adventure-filled lifestyle in Lebanon and across the Mediterranean. From there, he moved on to Australia, where he began learning how to sail, and he bought a boat and named it Hakuna Matata. Then in July of 2002, he decided that he was going to set sail from Tahiti to Hawaii, and he invited his girlfriend as well as his older brother Miles Dabbard along on the trip with him. However, Bison never made it to Hawaii, and neither did his girlfriend or the captain of the boat. The only person who was ever seen again was his brother Miles, who returned to Tahiti alone on the boat a few weeks later on July 20th. Then, 2 months after their mysterious disappearance at sea, Miles was arrested in Phoenix trying to buy gold with one of his brother's checks, and was found using his brother's passport. Even more suspicious is that just 2 days prior, authorities had found the Hakuna Matata with its license plate removed, covered in what seemed to be patched up bullet holes, and registered under a different name. Many believed Miles was very jealous of his brother's success and money, and so him as well as the other 2 on the boat and threw their bodies into the ocean. But no bodies have ever been recovered, so it's never been able to be proven. Plus, the only person who could have given a first-hand account of what went down, Miles himself, overdosed on insulin and died in September of 2002, leaving the entire ordeal as one big mess. Coming in at number 5, Richey Edwards. A big name in the late 80s and 90s, Richey Edwards was a moody and talented musician with a passion for angsty lyrics and a habit of extremely disturbing publicity stunts. For example, once a journalist alluded to the fact that he and his band were posers and not sincere punk rockers, and so Edward grabbed a razor and carved "for real" into his arm. During his rise to fame, Edwards was very candid about his struggles with mental health and self-harm and routinely romanticized the perfect disappearance. But still, no one actually ever thought he would try to plot his own. Although no one knows the truth behind his 1995 disappearance, there are definitely some strange facts surrounding it. Firstly, he had been due to fly from Wales to the US for a promotional tour for his new album, The Holy Bible. But 2 weeks prior to his disappearance, it was discovered he withdrew £200 from his account every day. Then, the night before he vanished, he left a gift addressed to his on-again, off-again girlfriend with a note saying, "I love you." Lastly, the morning of his flight, he checked out of his hotel at 7 AM, leaving behind his suitcase, and his car was later found near the Severn Bridge that connects England and Wales. He was never seen again. At first, it was suspected he could have taken his own life since they found his car by a bridge, but no body was ever found and no trace of Edwards was ever recovered. Next up at number 4 is Michael Rockefeller. Son of the famous and incredibly wealthy New York governor, in 1961, Michael decided to venture out to the remote Otjanep village of the Asmat people in South Papua, Indonesia. The purpose of his trip was to collect primitive art around New Guinea, hoping to curate enough to bring back a collection to his family's museum in New York. However, in November of 1961, while sailing about 3 miles from the shore in his double pontoon boat along with his residential anthropologist he'd brought along on the journey, it suddenly capsized, leaving Michael and his friend with no other choice but to attempt to swim to shore. During his likely unwelcome visit to the remote area, Michael believed he had made friends with several of the local tribes, and it's said that Michael called out to them for help, but no one really knows what exactly happened to him, as he was never seen again. Some say he never made it to shore and drowned trying to get to land, while one author, Carl Hoffman, revisited the exact location where Michael traveled all those years ago, and according to the locals he spoke with, they said, quote, "On the shore, he saw familiar faces, those of the Otjanep warriors. Instead of the rescue Rockefeller hoped for, he was stabbed in the ribs by one of the men, fatally in the precise actions of ritualistic headhunting and consumed by the warriors." However, as there is no proof of his death and no remains have ever been found, the truth is still up for debate. Coming in at number 3 is Lord Lucan. Unlike the others on this list, Lord Lucan, also known as John Bingham, was not really a victim of his circumstances, but rather a kind of evil guy that seemed to manage disappearing from the public eye forever. It all started back in 1974 when he bludgeoned his wife Veronica to death in her London home after she divorced him and won custody of the kids. Or at least that is who he thought he. After the deed had been done, Lucan was shocked to discover it was their nanny who lay dead on his floor. His wife, who was home at the time, called down for the nanny, and after not hearing a reply, went to the kitchen only to be attacked by a man she quickly figured out was her husband. She fought him off, managing to get him to stop after allegedly saying she would help him escape. That night, Lord Lucan called his mother asking her to pick up the children as there had been a terrible catastrophe and someone had attacked Veronica. Where he made this call from is unknown, but from there he drove to a friend's house, and that was the last time there was a confirmed sighting. There's a few different theories around what happened to Lucan, one being that he took his own life in New Haven Harbor, while others believe he went into hiding somewhere in Africa. The strangest theory, however, is that his friends convinced him to take his own life and then fed his remains to tigers at a private zoo in Kent. However, in reality, no one knows what happened to the man, and his body has never been found. Next up at number 2, Jody Husentreat. Somewhat of a local celebrity in Iowa, Jody became well known thanks to her time as a news anchor. However, sadly in 1995, Jody disappeared and has never been found. At about 4 AM on On June 27, 1995, Jodi's producer realized she was not in for her morning broadcast. This was not like Jodi, and so her producer called her to check up on her. When she got the call, Jodi profusely apologized, saying she had slept through her alarm and was on her way over. But 2 hours went by and Jodi had still not turned up. So her producer filled in for her in the morning show and then promptly contacted authorities at 7 a.m. When officers arrived at her apartment, they found her car as well as evidence that suggested a struggle near the car. Even worse was that they discovered an unidentified handprint on the car, but tragically, no more evidence of this case ever surfaced. Believed to have been abducted, no one knows where Jodi could be or if she's alive, but her case remains an active investigation. Last up in our number 1 spot is Jean Spangler. Back in the 1940s, while on the rise of Hollywood stardom, young actress Jean Spangler suddenly disappeared not only from the spotlight, but seemingly from existence altogether. On October 7th, 1949, Jean left her home in LA around 5 p.m., leaving her daughter with her sister-in-law and telling her she was heading to her ex-husband's house to discuss a late child support payment before she headed to work to film a night shoot. 2 hours later, she called the house saying that the shoot was going to take the full 8 hours and not to expect her home that evening. The next morning, Sophia, her sister-in-law, woke up and upon discovering that Jean was still not home from work, grew worried and filed a missing persons report. Once the investigation began, it was discovered that despite telling her family she was working the whole night, she was never at the studio filming the night of her disappearance. Even more peculiar is that a woman at a local farmer's market claimed to have spotted Jean browsing around 6 p.m. looking like she was waiting for someone. 2 days later, police found her purse with a strange note inside that read, "Kirk, can't wait any longer. Going to see Dr. Scott. It will work best this way while mother is away." Neither the mysterious Kirk or Dr. Scott were able to be found, and no one in Jean's family knew who she was speaking of. However, there was speculation that Kirk could have been Hollywood star Kirk Douglas. Still, despite a nationwide search, no further evidence on the case has ever been brought forward, but it remains open and she remains a missing person to this day.
Starting off this list at number 10, we have Kenny Beach. His real name is Kenneth Lee Veach, and he was an American YouTuber who posted videos of his hiking trips. He only ended up uploading 5 videos in total, but interacted a lot with other hiking channels, which helped him quickly gain popularity. Kenny was very proud of the toll his amazing and difficult hikes took on his body. He even said it took him 3 days to recover from his hikes usually, and that sometimes his toenails would even turn black and fall off. Near the end of 2014, Kenny posted a comment on a video that explained that while he normally enters every single cave he finds, when he found one that was shaped like an M and began to enter it, his whole body began to vibrate, and the closer he got, the feeling became more intense. The feeling really freaked him out, so he ended up getting out of there as quickly as possible. After this comment, tons of other users encouraged him to try and find the cave again and fight the eerie feeling and go inside, and to make a video of it. Kenny did exactly this and made a video that ended up being his most viewed video, titled M Cave Hike. Unfortunately, he was unable to find the same cave again. Viewers were upset that he was unable to find it, and they quickly started pushing for him to look again, but there were a few comments begging Kenny to leave it alone and not to go back, fearing that he would be putting himself in a dangerous situation. On November 10th, 2014, Kenny set out once again to try and find the cave and explained to his family that he would just be going on a short overnight trip. Unfortunately, Kenny never returned home and the search began. His cell phone was discovered at the opening of an abandoned mine shaft, which many viewers thought they recognized from his M Cave Hike video. Unfortunately, since then the trail has gone cold and Kenny still has yet to be located. While it is extremely unlikely, I really hope that he is still out there somewhere, and hopefully one day we get the answers we're looking for and his family will get their much needed closure. Moving on, in our number 9 spot, we have the YouTube user Bill Smith. Bill Smith was part of the QAnon movement and posted a lot of videos that he claimed were secrets that the government doesn't want us to know about. He was an extremely frequent poster, so it raised alarm bells when he just all of a sudden stopped posting videos. He never gave any indication that he wanted to stop posting videos, and his last video honestly made it seem like he had every intention to continue, with him saying he will fight with everything he has and that he was all in. There are a lot of theories about where he could have gone that include him being investigated by Homeland Security, or if there were any truth to his claims, potentially being taken into custody. People also believe that if his channel did become active again, that it would be the government covering their tracks and uploading on his behalf. It's a lot of speculation, but at the end of the day, who is Bill Smith and where did he go? Moving on to number 8, we have the user Paranormal Lana, who also was known by the name Alana G. She was a pretty popular YouTuber with over 50,000 subscribers and mostly covered content that was either paranormal, spooky in some way, or real events. On September 3rd, 2015, her channel was just suddenly deleted, as well as all of her social media accounts. This quickly became a huge topic of conversation among other YouTubers who were in the same genre as Alana. One person began to point out that just prior to her disappearance from the internet, she had posted a series of tweets explaining that she had a pretty serious stalker incident, and she was having to change how her social medias were being managed. Although many cyber sleuths have looked into where she could have gone, no one is exactly certain of what happened to her. If she really did have a stalker, maybe disappearing was the only thing she could do. I just hope that she is safe wherever she ended up. Moving on down to number 7, we have Shima Luan. Shima Luan was an American YouTuber who worked for the channel Super Planet Dolan. It was an animated channel, and Shima was one of the most active characters on the channel and was well liked by those who watched. In 2016, in a video called The Future of Planet Dolan, they explained that Shima had suddenly fallen out of contact with the other people on the channel, but the last time they spoke, she was safe, so they didn't suspect anything bad. Of course, a lot of viewers didn't believe this and began to speculate that this was the crew trying to cover up her disappearance. In February of this year, a YouTuber called Scarce Theater made a video taking a look into Shima's disappearance, and one of the members of the Dolan crew left a comment that may have cleared some things up for us. The comment read, "It's sort of an unsolvable mystery to those who don't know her, because to solve it in a satisfying way publicly, we'd have to invade the actress who played Shima's personal life on a public level. No one who walks away from a job in entertainment wants to be dragged out in the public and shown around. That would be ghoulish. In respect to the privacy of others, all I can say is that this is one of the better videos on the topic. Everyone else fell into trappings of teasing ideas of conspiracy and horror. Truth is, we always had trouble getting folks to separate the cartoons from the actors." This definitely leads us to believe that Shima had her reasons for leaving the channel, but it truly is none of our business. It's easy to forget that some of our favorite creators are also real people who deserve to have their lives kept private, if they so choose. While we miss Shima's content, it's good to know that she is safe. Coming in at number 6, we have the YouTubers who went by Mac Adventures. They were a father and son channel with a destination of Area 51. In 2016, they had posted a video of them finally arriving at the Area 51 border. As they arrive at the border, a couple of agents in full camo gear pull up to them in a truck, get out with guns in their hands, and basically ask them to leave the premises. After the video was posted, they released one more video and then an extended version of their original Area 51 video, and then they went totally silent. All of their social media were blown up with people believing that the Area 51 video was fake, which has led some people to believe that they just decided they didn't want to continue creating content because of the negativity, but that's not what everyone believed. A lot of people believed that maybe they had just gone back to Area 51 and tried to get further into the closed off area than last time and ended up getting arrested, or maybe even worse. After a few years of people speculating and wondering what happened to them, last year there was finally an update. The son of the duo ended up doing a YouTube livestream where it was finally explained that they had just decided to take a break, and it ended up becoming more of a permanent decision than they had originally planned on. While this is sort of an anticlimactic ending, it's definitely the best outcome that could have happened. At our halfway mark in our number 5 spot, we have the user Kev Jumba, whose real name is Kevin Wu. Kevin was one of the first YouTube stars joining the platform all the way back in 2006, and by 2008 he was the 3rd most subscribed to channel. Kevin used his YouTube success to go on a season of The Amazing Race, as well as even landing a role in a Hollywood film, Revenge of the Green Dragons. He slowly began to post videos less frequently and eventually made his channel entirely private, moving his focus more to the other aspects of his career. Things took a turn though in 2015 when he kind of just entirely disappeared for a while. People began to get really worried about Kevin, and rumors began to swirl about what could have happened and where he could have gone. Luckily, we eventually heard from Kevin again, but in an unfortunate turn of events, he explained that the reason for his disappearance is because he had been hit by a car and suffered some pretty serious injuries. The accident left him with a broken spine and a collapsed lung, as well as a number of psychological injuries. He has since been focusing on his recovery and credits his dad for really helping nurse him back to health. While it is obviously extremely traumatic and upsetting that he had to go through this near-death experience, we're just glad that he was able to make it through and recover. Continuing on to number 4, we have Spy Kitten TV, who was also known as Dasha. Dasha made a lot of videos about the Illuminati and people that she suspected were members. Her last video was posted in July of 2018, and while all of her social media profiles remain up and active, no one has heard from her or seen a post since. It is possible that she just decided to leave the internet life behind, but it is kind of curious that she didn't leave any sort of farewell. People have speculated that she was exposing too many secrets and ended up being kidnapped or silenced by the Illuminati, while others believe that she met some sort of ill fate in another way. I'm sure those in her personal life know what happened to her, and while I wish someone could give us some sort of update, I suppose it really is none of our business unless they decide they want to share. Hopefully she's out there somewhere, and maybe someday we'll know what happened and where she went. Coming in at number 3, we have Marina Joyce. Marina was a popular makeup and fashion YouTuber and had a large 2.1 million following. People began noticing that something just wasn't right about her behavior in her new videos, feeling like she was more distracted. This led them to believe that she could be scared or in some kind of danger. Eventually people noticed a gun in the background of one of her videos, bruises on her arms, and people said she wasn't blinking as much, and even swore that they heard her whisper, "Help me." In 2019, Marina ended up going missing for 10 days. While she was missing, her boyfriend was tweeting that she was safe, even though the police had an active investigation into her whereabouts, and he tried to shut down any claims that he was acting suspiciously, even though it's super suspicious to say that a missing person is safe when no one knows where they are. After it was confirmed that Marina had been found, she tweeted that she never actually went missing, even though, like I mentioned before, the police were actively looking for her. She claimed that her suspicious boyfriend had been taking care of her. There are a lot of speculations about what happened and why she disappeared for that time, but she claims that she is not in any sort of toxic relationship and just wants her fans to watch her videos and stop worrying. Hopefully she really is okay and fans were just reading into things that weren't actually anything, but it's a super bizarre situation. Continuing on to number 2, we have Kaylee Elise. Kaylee was a true crime YouTuber who covered things like missing people and unsolved crimes. In 2019, we did get a heads up from Kaylee that she would unfortunately be leaving the platform due to some health concerns that she was facing, and in a live stream goodbye, she assured fans that she would keep her videos up for everyone to continue enjoying. This is all fine and well, but people got very concerned a few months later. In December of 2019, her entire channel was deleted. It caused a lot of fans to worry about what happened to her and if her health concerns worsened after she left the channel. Unfortunately, there hasn't been an update this year on what happened or what led to the deletion of her channel, but some people have begun re-uploading her videos so that people can continue to enjoy the content. Wherever she is, I hope she's able to take care of her health concerns and focus on herself. Finishing off this list in our number 1 spot, we have the strange disappearance of Nicholas Sonderegger. Nick was a fairly small but growing YouTuber with 2,000 subscribers and was featured on the YouTube channel Explore With Us. Nick was 28 at the time of his disappearance and was last seen on September 7th, 2018 around 2:30 a.m. He had heard a female screaming outside of his home in Salton Beach, California, and went to investigate. After he failed to return home that night, he was reported missing the next morning. Some of his clothing that he had left in was found by the search parties, but it is still unknown what happened to him or where he could be. It's really upsetting that he obviously went to go and help someone who seemed to be in despair, and it led to trouble for him. It certainly shows his courage and bravery. There's a $10,000 reward for any information that leads to his whereabouts, so if any viewers have information, please contact the Imperial County Sheriff's Office. Someone somewhere has to know something about where he could be, and I hope that one day his family gets answers and closure.
Coming in at number 10 is Ambrose Bierce. A famous journalist and short story writer during the turn of the century, Ambrose was best known for his novel The Devil's Dictionary, after it was named one of the 100 greatest masterpieces of American literature. However, that would not be his only claim to fame. At the start of the American Civil War, Ambrose enlisted in the Union Army and fought in countless battles, once even garnering great respect in the local newspapers for his daring rescue under fire of a gravely wounded comrade at the Battle of Rich Mountain. By 1863, Ambrose was promoted to first lieutenant and went on to have a valiant military career. So when he disappeared from the public eye in 1913, everyone was completely in shock. Apparently in October he was on some kind of tour of his Civil War battlefields, then by December he crossed over into the Mexico border, met Pancho Villa, the leader of the Mexican Revolution, and asked to join his army as an observer. But after his crossover, he was barely heard from. His last known contact was a letter he sent to a close friend stating that the next day he was leaving for an unknown destination. And from there, he vanished without a trace. No body was ever recovered, and he became one of the most famous disappearances in American history. Coming in at number 9 is Jim Thompson. In the late 1960s, Jim became a popular figure after nearly single-handedly saving Thailand's silk industry from extinction. And while his mainstream fame came from his commercial endeavors, he also had an interesting past that some believe may or may not have had to do with his strange and inexplicable disappearance. As it turns out, before he moved to Asia and became a wealthy socialite, he was an operative with the OSS during the Second World War, and not only that, it was also rumored that he may have even been a spy at one time or another. Right before he vanished, Jim was reported to be leaving on a motorcycle for Malaysia. Then on Sunday, March 26, 1967, he disappeared from Cameron Highlands and generated one of the largest land searches in Southeast Asian history to date. Sadly, the mogul was never tracked down, leaving some to believe he could have been taken out by the CIA or competing businessmen. Those are merely rumors, as no evidence can back up what really happened to him. All we know is that he was never seen again. Coming in at number 8 is John Anglin. In 1958, John and his brother Clarence robbed the Columbia Savings Bank building, landing the pair with a 35-year sentence for the crime. At first, they hopped around a few different prisons, but after a series of attempted escapes, they were transferred to Alcatraz, John arriving in 1960 and his brother in 1961. Once they arrived, they were pleased to see an old friend, Frank Morris, and after Clarence's arrival in 1961, under the wing of Morris, 3 of them and another inmate began planning their great escape from the island prison. Over the next 6 months, they began secretly widening the ventilation ducts until they were large enough to pass through, constructing makeshift life preservers out of stolen raincoats, and a life raft that was stitched by hand and sealed using liquid plastic. On the night of the escape in 1962, leaving behind look-alike papier-mâché masks in their beds to keep guards off of their scent, 3 of the 4 men climbed through the vents to their freedom. But by the time prison officials realized they were not in their cells, the men were long gone. For many years, it was kind of assumed they had drowned, as they were not incredibly well equipped for the rough waters. That was until 2013, when new evidence pointed towards their survival. Apparently, the San Francisco police had been sent a letter claiming to be from one of the escapees, John Anglin, saying that they had all escaped that night in 1962, and that he was now an 83-year-old man suffering cancer. The purpose of the letter, as was detailed, was in hope to negotiate his surrender in exchange for medical treatment, but no one was ever able to track him down after that. Coming in at number 7 is Natalee Holloway. While Natalee Holloway may not have been a famous actor or singer prior to her disappearance, her case sparked international headlines, turning her into a tragic overnight celebrity. On May 30th, 2005, after a trip to Aruba with her graduating class, Natalee was meant to fly back home to the United States, but Natalee never even arrived for her flight. The last time she was seen was the night prior outside a restaurant with 3 local men who all claimed that they dropped her off at the hotel and had no clue what had happened to her. And when authorities went to go check the room, they found her packed luggage and a passport inside, but no sight of the missing girl. Things took a turn when one of the young men who was last seen with her attempted to extort her family out of $250 $50,000 in 2010. His name was Joran Andreas van der Sloot, and he claimed to have killed the young woman and hidden her body, but would only reveal the location after he was paid. The FBI was notified of the bribe and went along with it, sending over the wire transfer, but as it turns out, his claim was entirely false and was merely a ruse to get some money. Sadly, in the 17 years since she disappeared, Natalie has never been seen, nor have any remains been found. Coming in at number 6 is Frederick Valentich. On the evening of Saturday, October 21st, 1978, Australian pilot Frederick Valentich informed the Melbourne Air Traffic Control that he was being accompanied by an aircraft about 1,000 feet above him. So imagine Frederick's shock when the air traffic control replied to him saying that there was no known traffic at that level. Now, a little backstory. Frederick was a fairly new pilot who had twice applied to be in the Royal Australian Air Force, but was rejected on the basis of inadequate qualifications. However, this story doesn't end with a mysterious crash that one could assume resulted in a death. It's much more mysterious than that. After learning that there was not supposed to be anything above him, Frederick went on to describe what he was seeing, saying that it was a large, unknown aircraft that appeared to be illuminated by 4 bright landing lights. Starting to sound suspicious? Then he reported that the aircraft was approaching him from the east and orbiting above him. When asked to identify the aircraft, Frederick was not able to, only further describing its looks, this time mentioning it had a shiny metal surface and a green light on it. For the last time, the air traffic control radioed over asking to please identify the aircraft, to which he famously replied, "It's not an aircraft." His transmission was then interrupted by an unidentified noise described as metallic scraping sounds before all was lost. To this day, neither Frederick or his aircraft have been found, and many conspiracy theories believe that he was abducted by aliens. Coming in at number 5 is Virginia Dare and the Roanoke Colony. One of the most famous disappearances of all time wasn't just one person, but in fact an entire colony of people. Back in 1587, during the time that Europeans were heading to the New World to start a new life, a group of 100 settlers found the small island of Roanoke, now modern-day Dare County in North Carolina, and decided to make it their new home. Shortly after the group settled, it was determined that the man John White would be the leader of the group, likely due to the fact that his wife had just given birth to their daughter, Virginia Dare, making her the first ever English-born child in the New World. However, after some time in the colony, John headed back to England in search of more supplies for his town. What was meant to be a short visit accidentally turned into a 3-year stay due to the Anglo-Spanish War. However, once he was permitted to return, he made his way back to America only to find that his entire colony had vanished out of thin air. He looked around for clues for where they could have gone, but there was no sign of battle and no graves reported in the area, seemingly pointing towards the idea that they had moved to a new location. All John found was the word Croatoan carved into a single wooden post, and to this day the disappearance of the Roanoke colony remains a giant mystery. Coming in at number 4, Louis Le Prince. French inventor and the famed pioneer of the motion picture camera, Louis Le Prince is widely credited as being the father of cinematography. In September of 1890, on the cusp of international fame, Le Prince was looking forward to a planned tour to showcase his new invention across the United States. However, prior to his journey across the pond, Le Prince organized to visit his brother in Dijon. Then on September 16th, he was supposed to take a train to Paris with some friends, but got caught up, missed his friends, and ended up taking a later train. But strangely, he was never seen again. Of course, when the inventor didn't show up for his showcase, an investigation ensued, but despite exhaustive searches from French police and the Scotland Yard, neither him nor his body was ever found. There are quite a few conspiracy theories surrounding his mysterious disappearance, one being that he was assassinated due to his competing patent with Edison, while others think he could have taken his own life or been trying to escape financial problems. However, as he's never been found, we will never truly know what happened to him on the train that fateful day. Coming in at number 3, Roald Amundsen. The year was 1928 when celebrity explorer Roald Amundsen vanished into thin air and was never to be seen again. Roald had become a world-famous face after his 1911 expedition where he successfully reached the South Pole, and from that point forward, he was considered one of the greatest explorers to have ever lived. So imagine everyone's surprise when he went missing on a trip far less dangerous than any of his previous missions. The day was June 18th, 15th, 1928, and believe it or not, it was not even his own mission he disappeared on, but a rescue trip for an already missing person. Along with a crew of 5, Roald boarded the rescue flight and headed for the crew that had crashed while returning from the North Pole. But neither Roald, his crew, or his aircraft were ever seen again. Due to his popularity, a search for the team began nearly immediately, but after no evidence of a crash and no bodies were found, it was called off in September. Years later, in 2004 and 2009, the Norwegian Navy attempted to search for wreckage of the mysterious disappearing aircraft, but they too never uncovered a single piece of evidence, and whatever happened to Roald Amundsen remains a mystery to this day. Coming in at number 2, Raoul Wallenberg. A Swedish architect, businessman, diplomat, and humanitarian, Raoul's main reason for celebrity is due to his special operation in World War II to rescue Jews from German-occupied Hungary, saving them from being sent away to death camps. In 1944, while serving as Sweden's special envoy for Budapest, Raoul provided special protective passports to nearly 15,000 Jews, identifying the vulnerable residents as Swedish, thus deterring the fascists from deporting them. From there, he set up the newly Swedish residents in safe houses advertised as libraries or institutes in an attempt to keep the real truth hidden and their real identities safe. Then, in January of 1945, Wallenberg was called to General Malinovsky's headquarters to answer allegations that he was engaged in espionage. His last recorded words were, "I'm going to Malinovsky's, whether as a guest or prisoner, I do not know yet." From the day he left, his exact whereabouts have never been determined, and the truth behind his disappearance has had many theories. You see, despite the Soviets declaring in 1957 that he had died 10 years prior, suddenly in the night, there are many that dispute his death. Several former inmates of the same prison have come forward stating that they saw Raoul after the Soviets had declared him legally dead, the last witness claiming to have seen him in 1987. While we don't know for sure exactly what happened to Raoul, as there has not been any physical evidence to prove his death, authorities have continued investigating the case as recently as 2012, hoping to finally track down this wartime hero. And last up today in our number 1 spot is Emanuela Orlandi. The daughter of a prominent Vatican employee, it was not only the Vatican that was devastated when 15-year-old Emanuela disappeared from the Holy See in 1983, but the entirety of Rome as well. On the last day she was seen, Emanuela had apparently called her sister after her music class to let her know why she wasn't home yet. A rep from Avon Cosmetics had offered her a job. At the end of the class, Orlandi then spoke of the job offer with another female friend who left her at a bus stop in the company of another girl. However, reports state that the last time she was seen was getting into a large black BMW. The next morning, still missing, her parents were incredibly worried, so they called the music teacher as well as the police, and she was officially declared a missing person that day. But sadly, they were not able to track down the young woman. Over the next few weeks, the parents received a series of distressing phone calls from people claiming to have their daughter, but authorities were never able to track down or determine who was making these calls or from where. It has been suggested that a Rome-based syndicate kidnapped her to force the Vatican to pay them back an outstanding loan, while other theories suggest something even darker, an inside job by the Vatican police. Sadly, the truth of the girl's whereabouts remains as big a mystery today as it was 39 years ago, but still the case remains open, and Pope Francis is determined to finally put an end to the family's suffering.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Sabrina Bryan. You guys, in part 1 of this video, I talked about the Cheetah Girls and how absolutely iconic it is, so it's time we talk about another one of the movie's best known characters that has disappeared from our screens. Sabrina Bryan played the amazing dancer Dorinda in the movie. She was in all 3 of the movies, but we truly haven't seen much of her since. So where has she been? Well, she has certainly had a few TV and movie roles since, and has even dabbled in voice acting, but nothing ever huge there. She was on Dancing with the Stars twice, most recently in 2012 when she got brought back for an All-Stars season since she absolutely smashed it. I mean, she was the first contestant to ever get a perfect score from the judges. In 2017, she ended up being engaged, and we saw her on an episode of Say Yes to the Dress as she prepared for her Las Vegas wedding. In late 2020, she welcomed her first child, a daughter named Camilla Monroe. In our number 9 spot today, we have Kimberly J. Brown. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. Is it really Halloween time without the Disney staple Halloween Town? Those movies would have been nothing without Marnie, aka Kimberly J. Brown. I am not ready to talk about how they replaced Kimberly with Sarah Paxton in the 4th movie, like that wasn't committing a crime, but what I am ready and here to talk about today is where the heck did Kimberly go? After her role as Marnie, we truly haven't seen a ton of her since. She has definitely done a few TV and movie spots here and there, but nothing too huge or crazy. She went to university where she got a Bachelor of Science in Business, and she now runs her own Etsy shop called Craftily Creative that sells a variety of things, but also some Halloween Town themed items as well. In a crazy turn of events, she is also dating another Halloween Town legend, Daniel Counts, who played Cal in the 2nd film. He is now a realtor, if you were wondering. It is good to know they are both doing well and thriving. In our number 8 spot today, we have Jennifer Stone. When we think of Wizards of Waverly Place, we normally think of Selena Gomez, but Wizards wouldn't have been what it was without lovable, quirky Harper Finkel, who was played by the amazing Jennifer Stone. While Selena went on to be a huge superstar, as we all know, that life truly isn't for everyone, which left us wondering where Jennifer went and what she's been up to. It seems as though Jennifer decided to take a step back from the spotlight for a while and turn her focus somewhere else. She ended up becoming a nurse, which is incredible. Obviously an extremely selfless career that is so necessary. In 2021, she still continues to work as a nurse, but she has also returned to the acting world as well. In our number 7 spot today, we have Christy Romano. What is a show about a wild and crazy boy without him having a strict and level-headed older sister? Christy Romano played Ren in Even Stevens and was the older sibling to Shia LaBeouf's insane character of Lewis. She was also the voice of Kim Possible, so it's safe to say she was working on some pretty iconic Disney shows for a while, but since the ending of these shows, we haven't seen her on our screens as much. Well, after these shows ended, she unfortunately endured some struggles with both her mental health and with alcohol as well, but in an amazing turn of events, she was able to get the help that she needed. She ended up attending Barnard College, where she met the man who is now her husband, and the pair now have 2 absolutely beautiful daughters. In our number 6 spot today, we have Will Friedle. There aren't even words to describe how great of a show Boy Meets World was. It truly is a show that encapsulates my childhood, and it would not have been what it was without Will and his amazing portrayal of Eric Matthews, who was Corey's insane older brother. Since the ending of the show, he kind of seemed to disappear from our view, but what I didn't know is how successful his career in voice work has been. He has been working pretty consistently in that industry since the ending of the show, and he even voiced Ron Stoppable in Kim Possible, which I had no idea about until now. Will was actually called out last year in 2020 by a fellow former Boy Meets World castmate, Trina McGee, who played Angela on the show. She detailed some racially insensitive comments that Will had made to her while they were co-stars, while she explained just her overall experience of working on the show. It was upsetting to know that a show I loved so much was having these kinds of dark things going on behind the scenes, but it is amazing that even after all of these years, Trina has been able to speak up about it and open the dialogue between herself and her former castmates. Nothing will ever undo what she experienced, but I hope telling her story and having these conversations has brought her some peace, and I think it's pretty exceptional that she is so compassionate that she has found a way to forgive her former castmates, and she uses her experience as a moment to teach rather than a moment to shame. I guess that one kind of turned into what happened to Trina McGee, but I mean, we had to talk about it. I couldn't talk about Will and not bring up Trina for being a real one, and we found out where Will was. He's just voice acting. He was on an episode of Girl Meets World, so he's good, you know? He's good. We had to talk about it. In our number 5 spot today, we have Brandon Baker. Brandon Baker is from a Disney movie that truly feels like some sort of a fever dream to me. Brandon was the awesome surfer in the 1999 movie Johnny Tsunami, and that sort of kicked off his Disney career for a while. He was in the Johnny Tsunami sequel, as well as appearing in Even Stevens and Camp Confidential. While he seemingly had a thriving Disney career for a while in the early 2000s, he just kind of disappeared. Well, as it turns out, this was actually intentional. Acting at any age is a pretty all-consuming job, but being a child star is certainly not an easy ask. Brandon decided to leave the spotlight on his own accord in order to really be
be able to live his life. He said, "I took a brief life-examining sabbatical to kind of explore, travel, and just figure out what really drives me. I worked a lot behind the camera on short films and was still working on sets among other things, but just taking a break from acting to see just whether or not I missed it, and also just to give myself a chance to mature and grow up and approach it as an adult. Not everyone is able to take a step back and realize that the hard choice is sometimes the best choice for your own happiness, so it is very good to hear that Brandon was able to live his life and choose to return to acting when it felt right for him." In our number 4 spot today, we have Mitchell Musso. Mitchell Musso is best known for his role of Oliver Oaken, who is the goofy male best friend of Hannah Montana. Since the show and his character were incredibly successful, he actually got the opportunity to have his own show called Pair of Kings on Disney XD. He was also in the midst of starting another show called Prank Stars when he ran into some trouble. In 2011, he was pulled over and actually arrested for driving under the influence. Because of his clean criminal history, he was able to be released on bail and definitely took responsibility for his actions, but unfortunately this move cost him both of the shows that he was working on. Since then, we truly haven't seen as much of him on our screens. He tried pursuing a music career briefly, but that didn't necessarily pan out in the best way. Most recently, however, he worked as a voice actor on the Phineas and Ferb movie that was released on Disney Plus last year. In our number 3 spot today, we have Adam Lamberg. Okay, if you watched Lizzie McGuire as a kid, we know Hilary Duff was obviously the star of the show, but true Lizzie fans know that Gordo was the one who stole the show. I mean, just think about him in the Lizzie movie, you guys. Adam Lamberg was the one who played the truly iconic role of Gordo, and he had all of us shipping him with Lizzie, even though we never really got a chance to see that entirely. After the series ended though, I feel like I just never saw him again. As it turns out, he actually decided to quit acting. He worked on 2 smaller films before deciding to focus on his education rather than starring in movies. He ended up studying geography at UC Berkeley and then went on to receive his Master of Public Administration. Since then, he worked as a developmental associate at the Irish Arts Center in New York, and while he was going to reprise his role in the Lizzie reboot for Disney Plus, as you may know, that was sadly cancelled. I'm not sure what he has been up to since then, but I really hope we get to see him sometime again soon. In our number 2 spot today, we have Jake Thomas. How could I possibly mention Lizzie McGuire again without mentioning Lizzie's annoying little brother Matt, who was played by Jake Thomas. He was so perfect at being annoying and conniving and honestly just a bit of an evil genius. After Lizzie ended, he actually ended up on another Disney show called Cory in the House, but after that one ended as well, we really haven't seen him on our screens very much. He was in an episode of Criminal Minds and has since had a few roles on other shows that are similar, but nothing quite as large as his Disney days. While he continues his acting career, he also dabbles in directing, and he is also a photographer. It's good to know that he continues to live an artistic life in a multitude of different ways. In our number 1 spot today, we have Matthew Timmons. When I think of The Sweet Life on Deck, I, of course, like many of you, think of the stars Cole and Dylan Sprouse, but we truly cannot forget the incredibly goofy character of Woody Fink, who was played by Matthew Timmons. I don't remember seeing him before The Sweet Life, and I really don't remember seeing him after, except for that one episode of Jessie, which left me wondering where he went and what he's been up to. Well, while I don't really know what he's been up to career-wise, he is very present on social media and continues to make fans laugh. It's good to know that while he sure has grown up from his days of The Sweet Life, he has managed to keep his goofiness and silliness alive and well. Disney definitely isn't the place for him anymore, but maybe one day we'll see him return to our screens where he can most definitely keep us laughing.